need to wait to put the cameras on?
Where is Wayne?
I'm not his babysitter. Oh, he works here.
I know, but all the cameras are on.
Camera and he went to it.
All right. We're going to open the meeting with a short prayer and a salute to the flag. Would everyone please stand? Almighty God, grant us the wisdom to make those decisions that are in the best interest of all our residents. May the Heavenly Father of us all bless those who have given the ultimate sacrifice in service to our nation, and may He watch over and protect our servicemen and women now guarding the gates of freedom. Salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Terry, statement of publication. Jessica, statement of publication.
Take notice that this regular meeting of the mayor and council being held on this 10th day of October 2017 has been advertised and posted in accordance with Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975.
Roll call.
Councilpersons Buchanan.
Here.
Grillo. Kilpatrick.
Here.
Lembo.
Here.
Melendez.
Here.
Novak.
Here.
Council President, approval of prior minutes of the mayor and council.
Yes, Mayor. I move the following minutes be approved, subject to correction. August 21st, 2017, regular and agenda session. August 29th, 2017, special meeting, PBA grievance matter, and executive session.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilpersons Buchanan.
Yes?
Kilpatrick.
Yes.
Lembo.
Yes.
Melendez.
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, we're going to go into executive session for probably not that long.
15, 20
Counselor?
minutes. Yeah, whereas Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, whereas this public body is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, now therefore be resolved by the mayor and the council of Borough of Sayreville, County of Middlesex, State of New Jersey. The public portion of this meeting is hereby adjourned in order that the governing body may meet in closed private section for approximately 15 to 20 minutes to discuss the following matters: litigation, personnel, and contracts. Following the conclusion of said closed session, the governing body shall reconvene the open portion of this meeting to discuss any other matters which may be properly brought before at this time. The nature and content of the discussion which occurs in closed session shall be made public at such time as the need for non-disclosure no longer exists. This resolution shall take effect immediately.
Would the resolution be approved?
Second.
Roll call.
Councilpersons Buchanan.
Yes?
Kilpatrick.
Yes.
Lembo.
Yes.
Melendez.
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go into room 310.
I'm getting too old to stand anymore. And when I sit down in those chairs, I'm gonna take that back up again. One chair is so low.
memory. It's owned by a nonprofit that was formed. It's administered by the house. It's owned by a nonprofit. Is not an alter ego of the housing authority, right? No, no. It's a different number of members, I think, too. Oh, yeah.
What is the name of the nonprofit? Cerebral housing procedure? Cerebral housing procedure. We're just talking about what is the credit. You think so? Well, we're getting credit for some link.
Carryover. Carryover.
One of us still, I believe,
That's how it is. How that came about, right? The election and the neighbors were outraged. And he said, what can I do there? This is valueless. I can't put anything there. And I said, how about your house? And of course, not company. Oh, God. Crap. Now they got 600. They're happy. Went up to 6. There were 3 seats.
real piece of work.
Scary. I'm looking for somebody with their wife.
I don't know, they said he was out there before. I didn't even notice who
I
it
didn't either.
was.
I'm just trying to see somebody I don't recognize, you know, but then again, it could be somebody from a, you know, some area.
That could have.
Oh, there's not in the okay. Okay.
Motion to come back into open?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. First item of business, Terry?
Just say the planning. Okay. Planning Board's report on ordinance number 36417 and number 365-17.
Michael?
No comment. It speaks for itself, Mayor.
Next item, Jessica?
Should we have a motion to receive and file that item, Michael?
It was. It's received and filed. Sorry, Mayor, I didn't.
So moved.
Second.
You need a roll call?
Yeah.
Roll call?
Accepted.
Councilpersons Buchanan?
Yes.
Kilpatrick?
Yes.
Lembo?
Yes.
Melendez?
Yes.
Novak?
Yes.
Public hearing on the following ordinances. Ordinance number 364-17, an ordinance of the Borough of Saraville, County of Middlesex, State of New Jersey, adding a new section to Chapter 26, Section 25-111, entitled Development Fee Ordinance of the Revised General Ordinances of the Borough of Saraville.
Okay, this time I'm gonna open, planning and zoning. We do have public portion. Okay, at this time I'm gonna open the public portion for questions or comments on this ordinance. Yes, sir.
Steve Malinowski, 28 Scarlet Drive, Parlin, New Jersey. Within the ordinance, it refers to developers that have received final approval prior to the adoption of the municipal development fee shall be exempt. I think it'd be fair to know.
You have to speak up. The mic's not picking you up.
Sorry. It says in item number 6, developers that have received final approval prior to the adoption of the municipal development fee ordinance shall be exempt from paying a development fee. What I'm curious about is how many units do these developers have that are already approved that would be make them exempt from paying this fee?
Michael?
Yes, I think Mr. Leon Cavella could probably answer that. I don't have those numbers in front of me. It's,
Page 6, item 6 at the top.
Wanted to know what their,
How many units or what developers have, how many units previously approved and would be then hence exempt from paying a development fee per this?
well, I don't know the answer to that in terms of, it says that received final approval prior to the adoption of the municipal development fee ordinance. Well, this is the,
Correct. So who, prior to, if, assuming this gets approved, how many units for the developers previously approved?
this,
If you don't, maybe you can come back and follow up with that for us.
I can try to follow up on that and try to find, I don't know if I'm going to find anything really, but because this is the ordinance that's going to approve the development fees that we have, before the
John, you gotta,
before the council.
Right, I'm
So-
just, but there's got to be plans that are already approved, according to what I'm reading.
I'll,
John, if you'd research it next meeting, if you
I'll
have
bring it back to
have
the-
an
to the
approximate
board.
number.
John, if I may?
Thank you.
Does this, would Gondek Drive be included in this number?
the 96, the application with the 96?
Yes.
I'm sure it would. That was approved years ago.
The final.
I'll have to check on that too.
Does anyone
Council
know if they have their final approvals? Does Gondak Drive have final approvals for their bill? Do they?
Who gives them the final approval, Vicki?
Planning board.
Okay, that brings me to another, I'd like to put something before Mr. Mayor and the council. There's been a lot of rhetoric in the last 2 meetings that I've been at about the planning board and what's going on and what's not going on. What, in my experience, it has been very helpful, very transparent, when a board such as that can come to these meetings on a regular basis and report to the public, to the residents, what they've done for the month and what they're proposing and where they're going. This gives accountability. This gives the residents here a chance to speak to the issues that are on the table that are near to them and hear what the planning board is doing. So this way, it's full transparency, accountability, and everybody knows, and we're all on the same page.
No,
So I'd
their
like to put-
meetings are also public meetings. They're televised. You can attend the planning board meeting.
Understood, but I'm saying at this council meeting, it'd be helpful for the residents to have, whether it's monthly or whatever, a 5-minute, 10-minute proposal from the planning committee head of what they've done, which is the summary of the minutes, and a little look forward and where they're planning to go. I think this would give everybody a more comfortable feeling and put it all on the table so that we all know where we're going and what's happening. Less confusion. That's all I'm asking.
Anyone else? Jim?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. Jim Robinson, 11 Burrell Square. I would like to follow up on that gentleman's excellent question with respect to which applications does this apply? And I guess it's those that don't have final approval yet. My question is, does it need to be that way? Can't it be written so that it applies to those that have final approval, where they haven't yet begun? For instance, Mr. DuPont, you weren't here when we implemented the sewer connection fee years ago, but that ordinance said if you had final approval, if you had your building permits, if you built, up until the day that you hooked up, if you weren't hooked up, that ordinance applied. So can't the same thing be done with this? And just so that I understand, this is a fund that developers will contribute to so that there is money to support our affordable housing obligation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's a good thing for the town to have as much money in that fund as possible.
Yeah, but
Okay.
if I may, Mr. Robinson, I wasn't in court when Mr. Leon Cavello and Mr. Sachs discussed this, but applying a statute or an ordinance retroactively is not probably what was the intent of this particular ordinance.
That I understand, and I guess what is operative is when does it become retroactive? I just gave an example of another ordinance, the sewer connection fee ordinance, where if we applied that standard, people who didn't have a C of O yet, for instance, would be subject to this. My question is, can they be? Could you have written it that way?
You know what, I didn't draft this ordinance, so I would have to talk to Mr. Sachs and Mr. Leon Cavello as to the intent behind this ordinance in terms of retroactive application. I'm not quite sure if that was discussed. And I don't know if Mr. Leon Cavello can shed any light on it. If he can't, then I'm going to have to discuss it with Mr. Sachs.
Okay, well, I would object to your use of the term retroactive. I'm not so sure it is retroactive. I think it's a matter of how you define it, and that's, and if you go into it with that presupposition, we know what the answer will be.
Well, no, I think the conditions precedent here in paragraph 6 were receive final approval prior to the adoption of the municipal development fee. So that would in itself imply a retroactive application.
Can we change that?
Right, but if we change the wording
Simply
to,
change the wording.
And that's why,
change the
that's,
wording to complete build-out.
right, and so that's what, I did not draft this ordinance, so I'd have to talk to Mr. Sachs, who drafted in accordance with what the court discussions were at the time.
Okay. Well, and can we look into that, Mayor? Because I notice people come up here, well-intentioned folks come up and they raise questions, and we say we'll do something, and then it seems that nothing ever happens. So can we get an answer as to when we'll get a determination as to whether or not this can be changed?
Well, well, again, I think this, before you change it, my recommendation is to table this ordinance so that I could talk to Mr. Sachs regarding the drafting of this ordinance, as well as the applicability of, changing this to you know, without using the same phrase, retroactive. So what I would recommend, I mean, it's a good question. It's not something that I
I tried.
drafted, and Mr. Sachs unfortunately had to, and I don't think Mr. Leon Covello can shed any light on it at this point in time. I do not know that. Mr. Sachs had to leave early for an appearance at Old Bridge. So it would be my recommendation, based on the issues raised, that the mayor and council table this. Someone could make an application to table, and then we can bring it back up at the next meeting
Thank you
as
very
to
much.
that definition.
One final question on this. Based on the way it is written now, would this apply to the point?
No.
This would not apply to the point?
Well, the point
Mr.
is
Leon
part
Covello?
of- it also says in here that if you have affordable, this doesn't apply if you have affordable housing. Just developers that don't have affordable housing in their project. So it
They
wouldn't
have
apply to the
affordable
point anyway.
housing. They have 15 or 20% affordable housing.
Well, that's what.
Who?
Right,
The point.
right. So
That's
they
what I
would
just
be-
said. It wouldn't apply to the point because they have affordable housing.
Yes.
Why don't we get a legal opinion, or
Yeah,
several
and you know what-
legals'
and what I-
opinions?
It says it
Well,
in here.
then, Councilwoman, that is an excellent point.
Yes.
On the point. I don't know what percentage of the point is housing. I know of that housing, 15, but
I think Mr. Leon Covello can probably shed some light on this as a planner of Saraville,
yeah,
correct?
so, what
It
I'm
says in here,
wondering
anybody that
is,
has affordable
should it
housing.
be written
Huh?
so that for the commercial aspect of the project, they do have to contribute to this fund? Obviously, you're not going to make affordable housing kick into a fund to pay for affordable housing. But if that is and what, do you know roughly what?
It's 300,
percentage is
it's
that?
the, well, it's 300 of 2,000 units have to be affordable. That was the.
Yeah, but the 2,000
decision.
units is what percentage of the point?
15.
15%?
Yeah.
Yeah, 15, 18%.
Okay, so you have a project there where 85% of it, and the most productive, the 85% that is going to produce the most revenue, will not be subject to this ordinance? I'm not so sure that that makes sense. Obviously, the 2,000 units, you don't want them to have to pay twice for affordable housing. But for the commercial aspect, why shouldn't they have to contribute? Is my logic
Yeah, I know what
faulty
you're
here?
saying.
No, I think it's good, I think it's good logic, Mr.
But as I read this, the commercial would be bound to that anyway.
Yeah, I read that the same thing, but I think for clarification point, you know, I think that
Yes,
probably
for
the best
residential.
point is to let, you know, table this motion so that I can
Non-residential.
sit down with the Mr. Sachs who drafted it and ask him these particular
Why don't you
questions.
get some clarity, otherwise,
Right, agree.
otherwise we'll drive
So-
everybody
For the
away.
record also, Mr. Robinson, I did question that exact thing that both of you did in reference to Gondak Drive, and I think, Mr. Lembo, you can attest to this at our last Sarah meeting. I specifically asked now with the developer's fee ordinance coming before us, is that going to impact a site like Gondak Drive? Where are we in this process? Because I agree with you, if we're gonna adopt something, I wanna know how many permits right now would allow developers to escape this fee the way that it's written this way.
And if we table it
I
right
got
now, what's gonna come up at the next planning
Well,
meeting that
that's-
they may put final approval on before this
I
is
was just
done?
gonna say that too. Do we know from the planning board perspective, what is in the works within the next meeting or within the next month that would allow them to potentially skirt this? Is there any way that we can turn around and enact something with review? I'm just tired of losing and watching things slip through our fingers, watching money slip through
Well,
our
I
hands.
can
So might it
certainly
be-
pass along to the planning board that we should not do any approvals until that would be my recommendation to the planning board at the
Well,
planning board meetings,
but
that we not take any
They have a
action
tolling,
until this is
they have
resolved.
a statutory tolling requirement where they
Yeah.
can't just hold up things.
True,
So
okay, true.
maybe you should pass this ordinance, but make a commitment that you will amend it at the next meeting to do, at least consider those two things that I have raised, and I would, it
Well, it's three- it's
seems
thr-
to me that
it's-
people agree that that should be done.
Mr. Robinson, I think it's three things. A, right, it's the, whether it applies to retroactive, whether we can apply it retroactively, whether it applies to Point, and whether it applies to the Gondak Drive. You can certainly adopt, right? And you would have to amend if in fact we find that the inquiries to these three issues require that. That's certainly one way. I don't know, Mr. Lembo, I think
Number
you're the
two,
planning
we gotta
board
worry about.
representative. I don't know what's on the agenda next week or the week after. But you can.
I don't think there really is anything, if I'm not mistaken, but.
So you do have,
Double check.
we have a meeting in 2 weeks. Today's October 10th, so you have a meeting on October 23rd. So at that point in time, you can then have all of these issues addressed.
Thank you, and I hope you would consider that, because I think if you follow this to its logical confusion, it could save the town millions of dollars. It could save the taxpayers millions of dollars.
This is not residential, that was.
It's my understanding in reading this that there are developer fees for non-residential developments.
Yes.
So,
Four.
this would
Section 2, and it says
include those
received
commercial sites and
preliminary.
everything else.
Absolutely, I
mean,
agree, as I read it.
That's in page seven,
the
as I
commercial is
read it.
included.
It's on page
It's,
6.
it's on page 6, and then it continues on to page 7, where it's, obviously, they can't appeal something if it doesn't exist. So clearly, there's developer fees for non-residential.
Absolutely.
I think the
Site.
three
Mike.
issues that we were talking about, the retroactively Gondak Drive and the point, is probably the most
Mike, I
important.
think
it's
there's
a-
there's a more concerning page on page 4,
4.
number 2,
Yep,
which talks about the residential areas specifically, which
says
says preliminary or
preliminary.
final.
Well, again, that's all the more reason I think that you table this so that I can sit down with the drafter.
if it's legal, I'd like it to say, unless the project has been completed.
Mr. Leon Cabello, did Mr. Sachs draft this, or did you draft this?
It was a team effort. Yes, input.
You know what,
So whose input was on to do the preliminary and final site plans on page 4, number 2? Who put that input in?
In a number of these instances, they came with, there was some boilerplate that was inserted. In other words, there was some regulations that were they were already existing.
Preliminary
Already
or
existing
final.
where?
Yeah,
you have to speak in the microphone, Mr. Leon Cabello.
They were already existing in ordinances that COA had.
Yeah, so out of abundance of caution, what I would recommend with these questions that you've raised, table the ordinance 36417, and let me speak to Mr. Leon Cabello and Mr. Sachs, who drafted this regarding the comments that Mr. Robinson and the prior individual
Yeah,
just
and
mentioned.
maybe we should check.
Remove.
Mayor, you sit on the planning board. Is there anything pending that might come up within the next month that would escape these fees?
Pat, why don't
I'm
you
not
take
aware of
take a
anything on
look
the
and-
immediate agenda, no.
Okay,
Anything else, Jim?
all right, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Ken?
Thank you, Mayor. Ken Olszewski, 108 North Edward Street. First of all, I want to say I am delighted that this fee ordinance is on the agenda. I'm a little suspicious about anything that will delay it because according to some things I've heard, this fee ordinance is probably years overdue in several. I'm sorry that Mr. Sachs is gone. I think I've raised this at the microphone in a conversation with him, and I believe he's the planning board attorney in East Brunswick. He told me that the East Brunswick's had this fee ordinance for years. Somebody told me earlier this evening at a meeting of the Housing Authority, nothing to do with the Housing Authority, but I mentioned, they asked me for an update on code, I mentioned the fee ordinance. And somebody said to me that Old Bridge has had the fee ordinance in effect for quite some time and has a lot of money in the account for this fee ordinance. So anything that would delay it, I have to tell you, I'm suspicious of. The last thing we need is anybody coming in and being exempt from this fee ordinance. I don't understand why it hasn't been in effect before, and I'll talk about some of that a little later in the day. The other thing I just wanted to ask, we asked, and as it's presently written, how many units would be exempt? We asked Mr. Leon Cabello. I was wondering if Mr. Cornell, who sits on these boards as the engineer, would have any idea, this current ordinance as it's here tonight, how many units would be exempt? Through you, Mayor, any idea?
I don't have a number, but I think you need to know what parameters you're referring to. Are you referring to approvals? Are you referring to developments that have already been constructed? So I think there's a lot of different parameters that would tell you how many units you're looking to determine.
Jay, based on number, on page 4, it talks about preliminary or final site plan approval. So preliminary opens the door a lot wider.
But preliminary that's started construction, preliminary that's completed,
It says preliminary approval.
Preliminary site plan approval.
Don't
So
you
where does,
final
I mean, that's at the
before you
planning
put a
board.
shovel in the ground?
you have to get final approval before you get building permits. But there's
Okay.
projects that have received final approval that have been completed. All the COs have been issued.
Yeah,
So
no, that would
you're not talking about that. You're talking about projects currently under construction.
or that they haven't even started
or
construction.
about to go to
but they-
construction.
But they have the approvals.
Yeah, it says vested on the date that the building permit is issued.
I don't have that number.
In my opinion, this stuff has to be ironed out yesterday, if not sooner. And I hope if you delay this and pull it tonight, that I don't come here at the next meeting and there's some other reason it's not on the agenda. And the other question I have, I believe the question to Mr. Leonfabella about who drafted this ordinance, and I think your answer was it was a joint effort. Did we look, do you know if we looked at any other of these apparently successful communities like East Brunswick and Old Bridge, who got apparently a ton of money in these funds that went through the fingers of the taxpayers of Sayreville and went into the bank of the developers that have done the building? Do we have any idea if we've looked at their ordinances when we drafted what we have in front of us tonight?
I looked at other ordinances, and there are a number of, like you said, Old Bridge has, I'm guessing, but I think it's about,
It's on.
it's about, I think they have about $1.5 million in their trust fund. Woodbridge has about 500,000, I believe, in their trust fund. So they have significant.
Not on, John.
Not on.
Now it isn't. Like before.
If he held it.
Want to share this one, John?
So there are,
Another dead one?
I didn't do it. You did. You can take that one back.
Maybe we need to buy a battery company.
Just tip it up so the.
This one is working now.
Changed one today.
So there are a number of ordinances, and there are model ordinances that come through COA, through the regulations with the registration of the COA regulations. So we looked at that, and we used those sources to put this together. So there are a number of ordinances around.
It's working.
So, in summary, I'd say, does anybody know why we've come out so far on the short end and not had a fee ordinance before this, and maybe still won't have one tonight? Anybody have an answer to that? Well, let me make another comment here. The first I heard about a fee ordinance was early in this year from Mr. Robinson, who is, in all due respect to him, is not an official. I don't think he's pretty much involved in anything, but he's the guy that I remember coming up here and saying we should have a fee ordinance. And I can't imagine why a good planning board hasn't recommended this, why good professionals haven't recommended this. I got one more comment. You know, it seems in the last half dozen years, we've de-emphasized people going to educational seminars. When it comes to Atlantic City, fewer and fewer people have been approved to go there, from what I understand. And it's a matter of fact that we're saving money. I think maybe if some of the members of these boards, like the planning board, had been to seminars in Atlantic City, or even if they weren't at the seminar, if they were at the so-called parties where everybody supposedly wines and dines, if they exchanged information, maybe we would have had a fee ordinance last year, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, and have a whole bunch of money in the bank here. It looks again like the taxpayers of Saraville coming out on a short end, and the money is going to come out of their pocketbooks.
Anyone else? Is there a motion to table?
Well, I have a few questions. Number one, Mike, can we change this for number 2 that says developments that have not been completed prior to the adoption of this municipal fee ordinance shall be exempt?
I think,
Or have been.
well, I think there's a couple changes, you know, that I think those are probably substantial in terms of a final build-out. Your words that you had just commented, I think, are substantial. It affects probably a little more than just a few items. You know, this is the matter of the COA litigation. I know that Mr. Leon Cavello and Mr. Sachs were in court regarding the discussions of this. I did not draft these ordinances. So out of abundance of caution, and particularly, you know, with the prior 2 residents who came up regarding the applicability of the retroactivity, the applicability to the point as well as Gondak Drive, I think it's a language that needs to be addressed, but more importantly, I think there's questions that have to be addressed before adoption. So what I would still recommend is that you adopt, or that you table this. We can bring it up on October 23rd.
Yeah, but then we'd be doing first reading October 23rd.
No.
If we change it,
Well, I
it'll
guess,
have to be first reading again.
Well, I
If we
guess-
change it and do first reading tonight, we'd be on second reading for the next meeting.
I recognize that, but based on based on Mr. Lembo's comments that there was nothing on the planning board agenda between now and October 23rd, it's unlikely that there's a...
Yeah, but again, October 23rd would be first reading. It would be the first reading in November where we would actually adopt it. So we're looking at another month.
If you wanted to adopt this ordinance this evening in its current form, and then at least have the fee development order in place, you could do that, and then at the next meeting, you can have it revised to include either the final approval or build-out. You could do that also.
You
So,
know,
you can do that, and what I would recommend that...
Safe than sorry.
That's fine, you could then, if that's the case, then I would recommend that you adopt the current
And then do the
ordinance.
changes at the next meeting.
Right, and I'll have answers to the questions at the next meeting.
And we can amend.
Jay, how many projects would this apply to if this passes tonight?
Mayor, I think it gets back to the interpretation of when does it kick in. You have projects that have not started at all. You have projects that have recent approvals that are currently being built, projects that have been approved years ago that are under construction. So I think you need to determine how you would enforce the ordinance to come up with a number.
Well, how does this ordinance work, Michael? Who will pay this fee, who's already started the process?
Well, I think that's the question in terms of interpretation. Mr. Leon Cavello has indicated that it's based on the language here. It says developments that have received preliminary or final site plan approval prior to the adoption of the municipal development fee shall be exempt.
But it says based on when building permits are issued.
Well, it says unless...
That's when
it-
you actually get charged the money, when the
Right,
C of
unless-
Os are.
Right, unless the developer seeks a substantial change in the approval. So anything prior to the adoption of the municipal development fee, based on Mr. Leon Cavello, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, since you assisted in drafting this, they would be exempt from the development fee. Is that correct?
That's a potential, yes.
So this would be for projects that haven't yet gone through the process, haven't gone before the
Haven't
land
gone
use
before you.
boards, haven't received their approvals. This is for the future, not for the present.
This is an ordinance so that we can establish.
John, you gotta speak
We
right
can
into the mic.
establish development fees.
No, I
for
understand
COA.
that, but who, if this passes tonight, who will this affect that's currently in the process?
It'll affect all those developments that are going to be approved from October, what's today, 10th?
Well, who would that be? That would be the point.
Well, no, the point, it
Well, the
doesn't apply
commercial
to
end of the point.
commercial end.
Would the commercial end be, so we're gonna, on the one hand, we're gonna give we've talked about giving the point a tax credit, and on the other hand, we're gonna charge them 6% on the commercial property.
It says that in here too.
Well,
I'm just trying to see how this is gonna attract, does everybody understand with
John, does
with
this,
property, John, why don't you let me finish,
Sure,
Dan? With property tax, residential taxes don't really cover the bill, particularly the school bill. If we're spending, let's take Winding Woods, nice project, but roughly it pays $3.5 million in property taxes. I think there are 10% of our school kids are there, so let's take 600 kids times $12,000 a year is what we spend per child. So that's $7,200,000. So it doesn't cover it. And really, once you have one child in a house, you're being subsidized someplace, and usually by homes that have no children. It's just the way it works. It's always worked that way in New Jersey. So what has happened with most of the municipalities is you seek commercial ratables, meaning commercial development that will pay taxes and consume those services. So if somebody builds a warehouse, we don't provide the garbage pickup. We plow the streets, but we don't plow their entrances and their parking lots. They consume very little in services, so it's a net gain for us, and it helps subsidize the cost of our childhood education, of the kids' education. That being said, if in order to attract commercial development along New Jersey, let's take the Point. The Point was a heavily contaminated parcel of property, and it was very expensive to clean up. And they are expecting some kind of tax credit with the borough of Saraville to invest another $1 billion. If all of a sudden we say, well, we're gonna charge you 6% of that $1 billion, I don't know whether we're going to attract them, have them freeze in their tracks. I'm not sure how this is going to go down, but there are other properties in Saraville which we'd like to develop commercially. And for somebody to come here and then be penalized 6%, plus there's another COA obligation, isn't there, on commercial development? Okay. But it all sounds great to get somebody else to pick up the bill,
2.5.
but if you get nobody
It's 2.5.
coming because of the fees, then we have a problem. So you have to be careful with this on how you do it. To just go out and charge people fees without looking at the full ramifications and who's there and who's not there, I think we have to be careful. Steve, you had a question? Come on.
Commercial.
Mayor, I don't
Kennedy,
understand,
it's
though. Are
not
you-
6% for commercial, it's 2.5.
Are you saying that you're not in favor of the developer fee ordinance? I'm a little,
Well, let's see wait a minute. Let me see what Steve has to say.
Sorry, Vicky.
No, that's okay.
Steve Melanowski, 28 Scarlet Drive, Parlin, New Jersey. I understand what's going on about these fees. The truth is that we have to come up with some formula that says how we're going to collect fees rightfully for the borough. That being said, questions asked before. We don't know how many units, we don't know how many prior. I agree with Mary that why can't we extract that? Get this thing pushed through, get it out of there so that at least what's in play, what's been approved, can be feed. We're not saying throw away commercial property, Mr. Mayor. We're saying, yeah, we want to attract it, But we don't want to drive the town to a point where we're not collecting due fees on good projects that generate more revenue, and I think either Jim or Ken said it before, for the builders rather than for the town. We got to get our fair share. Then speaking to what the planning board has, Mr. Lembo, what they don't have, that's what I proposed before, is why can't we have them come here? What do you have planned for next month? What are you doing this month? Maybe they can answer that question that you couldn't answer, or Mr. Sachs couldn't answer if he was here.
See,
How
if
many?
I can include that in my report, it's
Yeah,
a very good idea.
you know, and
I'll
it
make a
does.
point to include that in my planning and zoning report at our meetings.
Right, I appreciate that, because I think
No
the
problem.
people here, if they had that question,
Good idea.
somebody on that planning board knows what's in flight, what's approved, what's almost approved. And I think it's fair to say, like every other community, we don't have a development fee. Why not? Why are we behind? I just heard about East Brunswick, Old Bridge. I don't care what they have. We have zero. So, two things on that. The other thing, and I brought it up at the last meeting, and I'd like to see some follow-up, and I don't mean to hog the mic, so to speak, but I asked, is there a pro forma on this whole affordable housing? That means the whole enchilada. What's going to be environmentally? What's going to require for schools, roads, municipal workers to support these additional homes and families that are going to be here, and we want them here. But what is that going to cost the town? Offset by development fees, et cetera, commercial fees, where we can say safely, we can build our town, be profitable, or not keep raising taxes to the point where we're going to start driving people away. So with respect, I'd like to hear when that pro forma might be ready, and hopefully we can change this ordinance to take that line out. Number 4, you know, on page 2, the same thing. So, thank you.
Thank
If
you,
I may,
Steve.
Mayor, question for John, Mr. Leoncavella. How did we arrive at these fees, the 2.5% to 6%? Is that similar to what other towns are doing? How did we come to
It's
those?
similar,
numbers?
and it's in the model ordinances.
When you reviewed some of the other towns that you looked into, I mean, I'm curious, East Brunswick, Old Bridge, do you happen to know what their developer fees are and breakdown from residential to commercial?
They're about the same.
They're about the same?
John, what other towns did you look at?
I looked
Yeah,
at
they're not
Old Bridge,
changing density.
Franklin Township, Woodbridge Township, Edison.
Is 6% like a max? Is that?
In your experience, can you give us the low ball percentages from towns and the highest? I'd like a scale.
Right.
Where do we fall in
Yeah.
comparison?
How did
Can't
we
do that really off the top of my head. I could do it for you by the next meeting if you want it. I'll just do a small survey and get you a matrix of
In your
what's
opinion,
top
what
and
did-
what's bottom.
In your opinion, what did you shoot for with the 6% or the 2.5? What was your guiding light? Where did you arrive at that figure from?
Guiding light was the ordinances that were the sample ordinances.
Sample, that came from,
That came from COA and the regulations under COA.
they came from COA and the regulations, okay, so.
And this has been, just to give the board, council information, this has been reviewed by the court master. He had no problem with this, as I also talked to her about the situation we talked about at the last meeting, I believe, with the phasing of the number of affordable units per the number of market rate units.
Oh, yeah, that's gonna.
And she agreed that that was a situation that has occurred for a long time. It can't be changed. It needs to be the way it is so that a developer can forge ahead with some subsidy, and then by the time they get to 50%, everything kind of works out the way it should. But you're doing, right now, she said, is 25% plus 1 unit. Then you get into the affordable housing. That was her recollection.
Was it 25%?
Well, that's what she said, her recollection is.
I thought it was 50.
It was
Oh.
50, but she said the way it works, it's 25 plus 1 unit.
But that's not what ours said.
Ours, I think
Ours
it
was
said
50. Ours said 50. So her recommendation is to bring it down to 25%. But our ordinance said 50.
Yeah, ours said 50.
Well, I'm just telling you the way she explained it. It's something that's been on the books for a while. It hasn't changed.
No, I
and it
like
can't-
what she said.
And it can't be changed. It's what it is. So
It could be
either
changed
we're
to the-
reading it wrong, or there was a misstatement made in the ordinance.
I misread. 6% is the charge for the highly dense residential component. The commercial is 2.5%. My error. My apologies. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to politely correct you on that 2.5%. But, Mayor, let me just ask you, I listened to your comments. Do you support this ordinance, or do you not support this ordinance?
Which ordinance? The fee ordinance?
The fee ordinance.
I don't mind fees, Jim, as you know.
Okay.
Fees, but I like intelligent fees. We've been trying for a very long time to attract ratables to offset, to give us property tax relief.
Well, those members of the council who have gone to the seminars that the League of Municipalities puts on, no doubt remember that the genesis of all this, the Mount Laurel decision, was started because the people who worked in Mount Laurel could not afford to live in Mount Laurel. And businesses were getting the benefit of labor, but labor could not live in that town. So there is a very definite connection between businesses and commerce and affordable housing, and that, in fact, is why these fees developed, because businesses depend on workers who, in a lot of cases, can't afford to live in the towns. So I just wanted, and those of you who have attended those conferences no doubt know the history of Mount Laurel and why there are these fees and why they are 2.5%, not 6% on businesses. But I just want to say this, Mayor, two other things. Other towns have these fees, and as we heard, have had them for years. So if we are talking about being competitive, what you say doesn't really apply, because we're competing against towns who have had these fees and have had them for years, and in some cases, maybe the fees might have even been higher. So that really is not a factor in competing for commerce to come.
Jim,
if
it's your
across
5
the board.
minutes.
And lastly, let me just say the other reason that we are doing this is because somebody is going to pay for affordable housing, and it is either the folks that will pay as a result of this ordinance, or it's the folks who are in this room, long-time Sayreville residents. And I would hope that it would be the businesses that are going to pay 2.5% that are coming to town. So I would suggest that the ordinance be passed. Thank you, Mayor.
Come on up, Ruth. Mike, after.
I'm Ruth Ann Mahoney at 2 Gerard Place in Portland. First, I want to thank Mr. Frankel for getting out the people to Pizza Hut. Thank you very much. My other thing is, if East Brunswick, Woodbridge, and all these other towns have this fee ordinance, and they do businesses, they get new businesses, they seem to be growing, what's wrong with Sayreville having it? And if, hey, I'm going to say it, Mr. Sachs is the planning board lawyer for these other towns, or some of them, why didn't he suggest it? I know you can't answer for him, but why was he not suggesting it for Sayreville? That's a big question to me. But if it works for the other towns who seem to be getting more businesses all the time, especially I notice in East Brunswick, I don't see what's so wrong with having it here. And that's, for now, all I have to say.
Thank you, Ruth Ann. Mike?
Michael Diadio, and is this on? Yeah. And I'm the chairman of the Sayreville Economic Redevelopment Agency. This is going to be a rare occasion because at this time I'd like to agree with Mayor O'Brien. So you should take a picture of this, because this doesn't happen too often. On Sarah, Mayor, you're right on point. We are doing $1 billion investment. 2.5% is $25 million. If you guys think we're going to be able to get North American Properties, who we just signed, to give us a check for $25 million, you're sadly mistaken. Any redevelopment zone where we work on projects, we are looking to encourage business. There's zones that need, that the planning board has already determined and this council has already determined are areas in need of redevelopment. The point specifically, a contaminated site with radioactive waste that was removed, and the amount of time in the 16 years that we've been working on it, to go back to them now, especially when we're talking about a pilot program, and ask for that kind of money, it's going to destroy our amenities package. I mean, we've already got them to give us $19 million for a school. You're throwing a big monkey wrench into a project that's pretty much been a done deal. I would respectfully request that when you do pass this ordinance, you exempt redevelopment zones. Zones that are in need of redevelopment, and the council and the planning board have already approved, are areas that are blighted, burned, contaminated. Thank you, Mayor. Something like the Amboy Cinema that we're trying to work on. I mean, to get people to come in and do this extra work and pay a fee on top of that is pretty unconscionable, in my opinion. So I would request that, I understand with businesses that in areas that don't need to be redeveloped, that don't need cleanup, the fee is reasonable. But in redevelopment zones, I just think it's unreasonable to ask. Thank you.
Mayor, I have a question for either John or Mike. A project like National Lead, which has a residential portion in it, would it exempt them from the remaining portion, since they're already obligating?
It's a mixed-use development.
But that plan's going to change. New developer coming in, the plan is going to change. We don't know how much.
And it's going to
but
change,
it's gonna
however, they're
change.
still going to have an affordable housing component of it.
Yes.
So my interpretation is they're meeting it affordable with it. Why would it not meet with the pilot program being a mixed use, since they're meeting a portion of the ordinance already?
There is, Mr. Council President, a general development plan that's been approved by the planning board that I believe you've seen, that was talked about maybe, now it's been 10 months ago, maybe 12 months, a year ago, maybe. That plan, I would say, has to be redone if there's going to be changes. Any changes have to go back to the planning board. It has to be approved by the planning board per the municipal land use law.
Understood.
So, to answer your question, I think that we would have the retail component or the commercial component is there. If that changes, we have to look at that. If they have a residential component, we have to look at that also. I believe they were paying both those components, so.
I'm not talking about that. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In reference to what the chairman of Sarah was saying, it appears, and maybe I'm reading it improperly here, but there are certain circumstances where when you have a site similar to the point, where you have this mixed use, you have residential and you also have businesses coming in of different types, that some type of review process and possibility of exemptions of the 2.5% could actually apply. But it would be up to the developer to then turn around and file for those exemptions based on certain things like reconstruction, renovations, and repairs. So it appears that there might actually be situations already built into this particular ordinance for something like maybe a redevelopment site that would be able to go and claim that repairs, alterations, or site mediation, that if that exceeds like the 2.5%, that would then, they would be able to file an exemption to the 2.5%. Is that accurate in what I'm reading?
That's the way it would work, and the function of that, the framework of that, is the general development plan that you find with the mixed uses and the redevelopment of mixed uses. That's why you have one. So because those projects are complex and they require, and if you I'm sure you've seen it, so that, and you've seen that, you know, it has a phasing out of a number of 10 years or 15 years. There's a lot of components that are in there, and that general development plan would be the framework of anything that we would have to do with the contributions established.
Okay.
So back to the earlier question, how do other towns do it?
Well, in terms of mixed use, they use the same, every mixed use that you have, every redevelopment that has a mixed use component, residential, commercial, all have a general development plan, you know, under the municipal land use law, which shows what the requirements are, and you have to follow those requirements. We've done that here, we have that. Now that plan is going to change, the general development plan. So we have to see, I don't know when we're going to meet with the point. I haven't heard anything unless Jace heard something. So we have to see when that meeting will occur and when they'll be ready to discuss any changes they're going to make. Obviously, they're going to make some changes, I believe, to some of the commercial component, either the mall or the rest of the commercial component, and some of the, I don't know if there's any changes to be done in the residential component.
John, does this apply if someone owns a home and goes to the zoning board? Let's say they want to double the square footage of the house. If you go up into Laurel Park, that seems to be popular there. They just add a second floor, so they double the footprint. Would this apply to that, or
A lot of
is
that,
that
a lot of the
exempt?
mom and pop
Only if it's
usages
two families.
are exempt. So they're not put under the pressure of applying or contributing to those. That's the whole purpose of this ordinance too, is not to put the burden, you know, on the small taxpayer, but put it on the redevelopment components that we have in town.
Steve?
No, he's wrong.
Steve Melanowski, 28 Scarlet Drive, Parlin, New Jersey. I agree that what Vicky said, there could be a discount for developers working on a site such as the Point, Mr. Mayor, as you pointed out, contaminated land, where it could be discounted for that. The thing that I'm most worried about is that this hole, so to speak, where it says anything previously approved.
Steve, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
That understood that the 2.5%, if there's a developer working on a site such as the Point, where they're going to be putting in excessive dollars to sanitize the land and do that, they could be entitled to a waiver of the 2.5% against what they're putting in. However, what concerns me is the phraseology in the agreement or the amendment that says previously approved without knowing what's out there. I'm just afraid that we open a floodgate and then all of a sudden we have a mass of approvals where this developmental fee is escaping our coffers, as many of us
Steve,
have said.
just so you understand, it's not like, if this is passed tonight, it's not like all builders who own property in Sayreville can do a rush to the planning board at their next meeting and get approvals. It doesn't work like that.
No, I understood. But it says in the document if it's already approved. So if
Correct.
you have builders that haven't finished construction yet, they're exempt according to what this would say.
That's a question for the lawyers.
Right, and unfortunately, the lawyers are what have gotten us into this point, and that's my concern is how do we...
It wasn't the lawyers, it was the judges who listened to the lawyers.
Well, in either case, this open door, and I believe it's a slippery slope, that if this
It
gets
is.
approved with that phraseology in there, and without any real work to get it done, we could open the door and that we have a ton of approvals, and as we said, we don't know what's been approved, has been approved, will be approved before this ordinance is approved. So my concern again, how many are already in the hopper? How do we close the door so we become more like East Brunswick and Old Bridge, collecting developmental fees, getting some income from it, and again, recognizing the fact, Mr. Mayor, as you said, that some developers are putting excessive dollars in for cleaning up sanitation land.
Yeah,
that
but
we
Steve,
could-
one of the things you have to consider, so the redevelopment agency worked for, it's been going on forever, the redevelopment of the old Club Benet. It started, it stopped, it went with the financial cycle of the country. and they finally, everything, the planets aligned, but there was a tax incentive for them to take down the old club and to take down the very, very low income rentals, bungalows that were involved there, and to put up, was it 3 or 4 stories, Mike? 3-story, about 150? About 150, very nice. But it's not like somebody just came in, said, whoopee, I'm going to take this risk. The redevelopment worked at great length and over a very long period of time in negotiations to get somebody to risk their capital to come here. And part of that risk was a tax incentive. So that's why I keep saying, and that's not a mixed use at the moment. It's strictly a residential project. It's a good residential project. I'm not hearing any negative feedback from the area residents. But all that being said, so if we're giving them a tax incentive in order to induce them to risk their money to build in Sayreville, and then we charge them back whatever fee we're going to charge them, it's like taking money from one pocket and putting it in the other.
Mayor, if you have an affordable housing component, you're already exempt with this. It's just people that
Mike, did
don't.
that have a housing
Yes,
component?
yes.
23.
And I don't mean to, disrespect the good work in the past. What I'm talking about, and I'm hearing this council talk about, is how do we plug this gap going forward so that revenue flows on a fair basis without disenfranchising, construction projects, good projects like The Point, et cetera. But how do we make sure that we stop the bleeding and put a fair plan in that doesn't have leaks, so to speak, and we let revenue that we could be getting escape? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Thank
I
you.
understand.
Thank you.
Can I just clarify for 1 second, the Morgan Bluff, which is what's being referred to as the Club Benet site? First of all, I don't want anybody thinking that's not built out. That's done. That project's been done. It's completely 100% occupied now. It was 100% residential. That was the project. And the Economic Redevelopment Agency made certain of a few things. Number one, they absolutely had to put in a COA component. So they wouldn't even fit into this development fee ordinance because they did what they were supposed to do by the law because our agency made sure they did. Okay? They made sure of it. So, to turn around and bring that particular site up in this case, it really doesn't work because it's not mixed use. The development is done. It was 100% residential. And Sarah did their job in negotiating that. They turned around and made sure that site improvements were made in that area. They were required to take down the Club Benet even though they had no ownership to that piece of property. They had to do road improvement, bringing up the old Spy Road bricks to the front, and they had to turn around and comply with historical lighting on top of that, and give our fire department a parking lot, which is something they didn't have. So I think that if you look at this ordinance in reference to that, number one, they wouldn't have to deal with it. They did their COA responsibility, and they also did necessary upgrades. So I'm going to tip my hat over to Sarah because that was a great project. And out of that project, it's my understanding that there were somewhere around maybe 11 kids that were in those homes, those bungalows.
12.
And I think we knocked it down to, what is there, a total of four? So we actually saved in a cost out to the kids that are in that were coming into the school district from there to now 4 because you also had the age restrictions and they were very smart with the number of bedrooms that they would be allowed to build on that site as well. That's a smart project right there. That did a lot for that area, so.
I too want to commend Sarah for their due diligence with regards to affordable housing. Even with the Gondak property, they were pushing for affordable. However, it's my understanding that the planning board pulled out the affordable component of that plan. My question, and it pertains to this ordinance, is since that was taken out, what is the status of that plan now that they are no longer in compliance with the redevelopment plan? Does anyone know that answer?
I asked that question at our Sarah meeting, because of this ordinance. It was my understanding that once this ordinance was put in and we adopted it, that then Gondak Drive, which is the Golden Age redevelopment site, that had a substantial change to their site plan over the course of the last 10 years. They now have 96 units that they intend to put in there, and none of which are affordable. So at the very least, by adopting this ordinance, I was hopeful that we were going to be able to at least impose these fees on them. However, when I took a closer look at our Sarah meeting, you could watch it on tape. Page 4, the way the language was written into the agreement when it came, it said COA units were to be required, and here's the thing that kind of destroys things for us. It said they would have to put in COA units as the planning board required. The planning board did not require them to put in any affordable housing. And I said to our attorneys, I actually said to our Mr. Samuels, I said, I used to like you, because he knew the language of the contract and I had to pull it up. I said, now I don't like you, because he was right with his language, his phrasing of what the contract said. So the planning board turned around and told them they didn't have to put in any COA units, and now we can't enforce that. I was hopeful that this development fee ordinance was going to, at the very least, allow us to collect money from him.
When was that,
But-
when was that passed by the
When
planning
was that
board?
passed? Oh, 2007, I want to say.
Yeah, I believe it was
2007. There's been many changes to that particular site. Originally, it was supposed to be, Golden Age was supposed to be like an Alzheimer rehabilitation kind of facility, and then that changed, and it was supposed to be a different type of senior housing unit, which was only going to have 84 or 88. And then they turned around and came back to, I guess, the planning board and asked for an amendment to that, which would allow them to build now 96 units. And for whatever reason, they're exempt now from having to build COA units based on what the planning board agreed to. I'm beside myself, and I'm concerned about the language in this contract on page 4, because I don't know what the definition of preliminary is. Preliminary could mean anything.
Well, I was just leaning over the council president, because paragraph 2 says that developments that have received preliminary or final site plan approval prior to the adoption of a municipal development fee ordinance shall be exempt from development fees unless, and this is where I think Mrs. Kilpatrick is coming, unless a developer seeks a substantial change in the approval. So if in fact there was a substantial change, then there is some argument that this fee would be applicable. Right, and there is an appellate process here and at the end of the ordinance regarding what the developer could do if it disagreed with the applicability of the fee.
I appreciate that. I did turn over the contract to the attorneys over on Sarah as well to see if there was any other interpretation to the language that said the planning board didn't require.
And and if you all adopt this, as you guys seem to be initially wanting to, I made a note that I'll send this to the attorney for Sarah, Mr. Baker, and then he can probably give you an opinion as to the applicability for the Gondak Drive.
But
Wayne, what was the inducement for the development of the bluffs, the tax inducements?
You're talking about what's the pilot,
Right.
how much the pilot is. The calculation escapes me. I don't know the exact calculation, but it's, I believe it's approximately $200,000 a year, which is like a set, it's based on the revenue that's generated, but it's estimated to be $200,000 a year.
For how many years?
I believe that was 20 years,
Okay.
just 20, it could be 30, it can be extended. Even though the initial may be 20 years, they can extend it up to at least 30 years.
So it's a minimum of 4, maximum of 5? Minimum of 4 million, maximum of 5
Right,
million?
right.
Okay.
So getting back to Gondak Drive, though, when was the last change made with the planning board?
From what I understand in my research, the last change that was made was that it went from an 88 or 84 unit, and you can correct me, Jay, if I'm wrong, because you're probably more familiar with it. It was difficult for me to piece together the approvals going back into the 90s to what it actually is now. I know for a fact that I believe my documents was 2007 was the most recent with the 96 units. I don't know how far back the rest of that went.
That's probably correct, but that was based on ordinance amendments to the redevelopment plan. So that wasn't something determined specifically by the planning board. There were ordinance amendments that allowed those changes to take place.
Yeah, I was just looking specifically at the COA change, and if they were turning around trying to claim like that one change that came down for developers to make adjustments to their senior housing age restrictions, which is similar to what Kaplan did over here. I was just looking specifically at the COA, and it would still require them to put in a COA obligation, because the litigation in that and the court's ruling in that was that they must put in affordable housing if they were going to appeal on the fact that because the age restriction was not allowing the developer to make enough money.
I don't think they qualified for
I
that
didn't think they did
conversion,
either.
so that's why that didn't go
So I
through.
don't, to answer Dan's question, me personally, I don't know why the site changes were made from the origin of the project over the course of over a decade, from the 90s to the 88 units and now up to the 96. I don't have that because I wasn't able to obtain those documents. But I'll defer to Jay if you want to give us a history on that.
I think it was based on economic conditions. There originally was an approval for an assisted living facility. They indicated it was not economically feasible. Then they came back and wanted to change it to an age-restricted community with a certain number of units. That was approved. Again, for economic reasons, they felt they should be able to get more units. Again, they came back, and that eventually was approved.
And that was approved with,
Yes.
so it went from the 80-plus units to the 96, all of which are zero affordable housing. And their claim apparently is that it wasn't economically rich or fulfilling for that developer to use the original plans.
The affordable housing component wasn't part of any of the ordinances, so that was not discussed as part of the changes.
So it's concerning that it wasn't even discussed then.
That's
It's in the
just par for
Sarah
the
agreement.
course.
All right, so what is the pleasure of the council with this ordinance?
There's one other thing I'd like to say, Mayor, before you asked about
I have to close.
changing.
I'm sorry, I'll get you, Ken.
Changing the, if you had a single-family home and you added on to it, made into a two-family, that would be I think Mr. Leoncavell said it would not be. It is subject to this.
No, he said double the size, not make it two-family.
Oh, okay.
Ken?
Again, Ken Olszewski, 108 North Edward Street. Through you, Mayor, I'd like to ask Mr. Leoncavella, as you reviewed the fee ordinances in other towns, did you happen to notice how long they've been in effect?
I don't have any dates, but they have been in effect for a while.
They have been in effect for a while. As again, Mr. Saxon, a private conversation with me, while I was in private, I think it was at a meeting, I said he'd been the attorney in East Brunswick, and they've had this ordinance in effect for years. I'm quite amazed. I'm quite amazed at this point in time, after these communities have had these ordinances in effect for so long, we are where we are tonight. And I want to go back to the last couple of months where the people have been trying to get various boards or representatives of boards together. The mayor and council, planning board, Sarah, who spoke tonight on this, the housing authority. And I know some of the legal opinions and stuff. However, I can't believe that we can't get some kind of a structure that could get representatives of these boards together that could iron out some of these problems and not take a public hearing for who knows how long this is going to go on. I don't mean tonight. How many council meetings this to go on to try and iron it out? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We know these ordinances have been in effect. If we had the representatives of these boards to bring up their objections, et cetera, And nobody's going to tell me that that's illegal. Maybe the whole board is illegal, to have representatives of the board, to have them advertised. I have the whole damn thing advertised. We probably would avoid some of this stuff that's going on. And I got to tell you, Shakespeare said, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. It seems there's something rotten in the borough of Sayreville, and it's nothing but obstruction with the COA, with even getting a fee ordinance adopted. And you know what we really need? I'll tell you what we need here. I think you need to go back to the graduate and say, where have you been, Joe DiMaggio? We need some Joe DiMaggios here to step forward and stop throwing stumbling blocks in this and get it done, and get it done for the people of Sayreville so it can start filling the coffers of the taxpayers instead of letting the developers off the hook and start filling and keep on filling the coffers of these developers. It's a sad representation tonight to see what goes on, and basically we're nowhere. So who knows when this fee ordinance will really get to be effective. I can't believe it'll be anytime soon, and the taxpayers will keep getting scammed. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Being no other questions or comments, what is the pleasure of the council? Oh, I'll take a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so what is the pleasure of the governing body on ordinance 364-17?
Well, there seem to be a lot of issues we need to resolve here. I mean, the last thing we want to do is throw a monkey wrench into the point here with these fees. We don't know who we can exempt, if we can exempt them. I mean, there's page 7, there's an appeal of development fees, but that would be out of our control. That would go to a director of taxation. So we're turning that over to another party. Not very comfortable with that. I think I'd rather see this
Counselor,
rewritten.
What's your recommendation?
My recommendation, Mayor, is to adopt this in its present form, and then I will speak to Mr. Sachs, Mr. Baker, regarding the questions that the council has said. With respect to the appeal process, which was drafted by Mr. Leon Cavello and also Mr. Sachs, is standard. One is to the Division of Taxation in terms of a commercial. The other one is to the residential developers, residential development fees. They have a right to appeal to the county tax board. So those are standard paths in which there is an appeal process as part of the due process allowed in this ordinance. But my suggestion is to adopt this fee ordinance, and then I will answer the questions on October 23rd at your next meeting.
If that is the will of the governing body, is there a motion?
Well, Mayor, I just want to, some comments too. I think that obviously this is far overdue to pass an ordinance like this. I would like to see stricter language regarding implementation of the ordinance. I'd also like to see, to make sure that the appeal, which my understanding and my interpretation of the appeal for something such as the point would be exempt from this, as they have
I think we need to add something to exempt, like Mr. Diadio said, the redevelopment zones.
again, we don't, not necessarily all. That's why I think that the appeal process is a good process.
But that would be out of our hands.
I don't think so.
Well, if they can justify it, they can justify it. You know, you had the point up there who spent tons of money already cleaning up property and is looking to invest in our town with other amenities. So I would see that, I don't see how that wouldn't get through. But I just think this is far overdue, and it's something that this borough is needed. It's just disgraceful on how bad it has gotten regarding the lack of affordable housing due to just people turning their heads on it.
Well, Dan, just for my own edification, what is your top price on affordable housing? What do you think somebody should be able to buy a unit for?
What?
What do you mean? What-
Well, you're
there's a
talking about
standard.
that we have no affordable housing. I think Saraville has a great deal of affordable
Well,
housing.
obviously not, because we were
We're
at
in
court and we're
violation.
in violation by 700
No,
and
we're
some
in
units.
violation of the court order, but Saraville
We
has.
haven't met our obligation. There's guidelines
Dan,
for
I'm
it.
just asking you, what is the price point that
Well,
to
obviously,
you
Mayor,
makes
you know,
sense?
you're on the, you sit on the planning board, don't go to the planning board, you have people attend the planning board, your opinion is that we have enough affordable housing.
Yep.
But legally,
That's your
no.
opinion,
Yep.
but yet they continue to be built even though we lost the lawsuit.
Everybody lost a lawsuit. We're not the only ones. Everybody that went to court lost a lawsuit.
So I don't think we can claim we have enough affordable housing.
the
because
Just my,
we didn't.
listen.
You're supposed to have a
lawsuit.
component
The
with every
lawsuit
time you build
is
a development.
coming down from the Supreme Court. But I'm just trying to understand you better.
You're required to have a component every time you have a
Dan,
development.
what is the number for a one-bedroom? What do you
Right
think?
now, we have 96 units going on Gondek Drive, so there's 10 to 15%.
Dan,
of the building.
no. What do you think someone should pay in rent for affordable housing?
There's a formula devised
There's a
for
formula.
that.
I'm just asking you what
Whatever
you.
the formula says, Mayor.
Well, that's a comprehensive answer. Okay, so.
What?
I
what
didn't
is-
develop it. I mean, it's a guideline.
No, I'm asking you for a number. Usually, if you work for a living, you're not looking for the formula as much as you're looking for the landlord to say the rent is 800, 1,000, 1,500. What is the rent? That's
Luckily,
what
I'm
I'm
in a
asking
position
you.
where I don't need to know that right now, Mayor.
Okay. All right. So, what is the
Again,
pleasure of the
Going
governing?
back
bo-
to it, it's been required, and your planning board continues not to follow the guidelines.
Dan, it's an old song. It'll end in a
And it
couple
is an old
weeks.
song. It's a disgrace
It's not-
for
it's
people
not
out
a-
here in this public.
Mayor, we
gonna
wouldn't be
end right
sitting here
after
with this
election.
Because your
problem
board
now.
keeps on turning their head.
Right after election, it'll end. Okay.
It
What
will
is the
not.
pleasure of the
That's
governing
the
body?
problem. Right after election, it's not going to
Yeah,
end.
Yes,
It's
it
never,
will.
this is not
Whoever is
gonna end.
sitting up here is going to
Okay.
be responsible for making decisions that are going to change
The drama will
face
end.
There's some
of
people
this
up here that
town.
are
Mayor,
fully
you're
out
the
for the
drama.
developers and some out
I
for
don't
the
think so.
residents.
I'm
We know where it
Okay,
is. Everyone
so
out
what
here
are we
knows where it
doing with this ordinance?
We all know
364-17?
who's pushing for the developers here, Kennedy.
is. Mayor, I move the
Mary,
ordinance be adopted on
that's
second and final
baloney.
reading and advertised according to law.
Second, with comments, I'd just like to say that I want this passed right now so we can stop any future development, but I really would like to see changes in that introduced at the next meeting to have anybody that is currently building without affordable housing should be charged a fee.
Councilpersons Buchanan,
Yes.
Kilpatrick,
With comment, yes. First, let me just say, it's been a long time coming, ladies and gentlemen, that this developer's fee ordinance is actually before us. That, I want to commend everyone that's worked on it. Whether it's perfect or not, it should have been here a long time ago, but at least we're having the discussion, and we'll get it right. We'll get it right, because it's what needs to happen. But again, we do need changes in this, as we see, to make sure that this ordinance serves our town and our residents first. So, yes, but with the same caveat that Mary stated, that changes do need to be made for the next meeting.
Lembo,
Yes, with the same sentiment that I do want to see some changes to it. Like Mary said, include all the units, and again, I don't want to see this hurt the point, so hopefully we can get something in there so it does not affect the point.
Melendez,
So, I guess this will be a living, breathing document, right? We'll be able to amend as we go.
Yeah.
And we're gonna move forward. Since you're doing all the calculations of in the past, any way you can figure out an estimate of what we could have collected over the last 10 years?
What's the
I mean, you're doing all this work, it'd be nice to know. I'm sure Mr. Steve would, let's do 16 years.
Correct me, that's what you want, I'll give it my best
We can need to grab the microphones.
If you direct me to do that, I will try to attempt that task.
Dan? I'm directing you.
Okay.
Councilman Melendez, your vote?
Yes.
Novak,
Yes.
Okay, next ordinance.
Public hearing on ordinance number 365-17, an ordinance of the Borough of Saraville, County of Middlesex, State of New Jersey, supplementing and amending Article 3 of Chapter 26, Land Development of the Revised General Ordinances of the Borough of Saraville to permit affordable accessory apartment in the office services overlay zone.
At this time, I'm going to open the public portion for questions or comments. Are there any questions or comments on this ordinance? Being no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Yes, Mayor, I move the public hearing be closed, the ordinance adopted on second and final reading, and advertised according to law.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Lembo,
Yes.
Buchanan,
Yes.
Grillo, Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Melendez,
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Next item.
Public hearing on ordinance number 376-17, bond ordinance providing for improvements to Pulaski Avenue in the Borough of Saraville, New Jersey, appropriating $2,600,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $1,525,000 bonds or notes of the borough for financing part of such appropriation.
This time, I'm going to open the public portion for questions or comments. Barbara?
Barbara Kilcummins, 22 Schmidt Street. I promise not to take 2 hours. I know this is a very important ordinance, but, and you, Mr. Melendez, to request something, a request like that, I hope you're willing to pay this planner for all the research that has to be done. That seems like to be ridiculous.
Let's see.
The money that we have lost over the years forever if by not instituting a fee. My question is about Pulaski Avenue. What are we doing for $2,600,000 when in the budget to do sections of the community in the budget is only $2 million, and here we have $2,600,000 for one street?
Barbara,
And
I could
wait a
answer
minute,
that.
I'm-
Okay.
The street was cement to begin with. When I spoke to Mr. Bailey about the intersection and complained about the intersection of Washington Road and Pulaski at the beginning, he told me it was a county problem because the water problem, and it was off since Washington Road is a county road. Well, doing a little questioning to other people, apparently, and I don't know if this is true, I guess Mr. Cornell could answer, that there was a storm drain that was dead. It was just went nowhere of one of the sections there, and that's why it doesn't absorb the water. So the storm drain was never hooked up to another part of the community, and I don't know if this is true. But why is Pulaski Avenue costing, one road costing $2,600,000?
Go ahead, Jay.
Okay.
Well, first, Barbara, the borough's receiving over $1 million in state funding to assist with this project. So it's not all borough funds, it is DOT trust funds. There are approximately $800,000 worth of water improvements included in that estimate. The Borough Water Department has recommended that all galvanized water services be replaced when roads are reconstructed. And they're telling us that there are galvanized water services on Pulaski Avenue. Unfortunately, they're not sure how many. So we have to anticipate that all the services need to be replaced. So, like I said, approximately $800,000 of that $2 million
So it's the
plus
water pipes or
is
water
replacing
drains.
water services.
Old galvanized,
Correct,
that I
yes.
understand.
And then
But
also
what-
the storm drain that you mentioned.
Yes.
Years ago, there were storm sewer work done on Pulaski Avenue, and certain lines were abandoned. So I think that's probably what you're referring to, is there are lines that are active, but there are lines that were abandoned. Because we had raised some questions about that, and we had the Borough Public Works Department go out with a TV camera to try to trace the line so we can understand how the water was flowing. And they did find sections of pipe that I believe were supposed to be plugged years ago, and they had been plugged. So it's not like they weren't going anyplace. They were blocked off when the work was done years ago.
Could this cause the erosion and the problems on the intersection of Pulaski and Washington Road?
I don't think that's related to that. And also, just for your information, the county is also looking at redoing that intersection of Main and Pulaski. They just did the Washington and Pulaski end. They're
Well,
also
they
looking.
just keep repaving and repaving, and then after a while, the erosion starts, and there's always water laying there,
as-
and that seems to be the problem.
As part of our project, we've looked at the lines and we've looked at all the inlets, and any one that has issues is being replaced or updated. So that's another reason that the cost is so high, because we're also redoing the storm sewer system where needed.
So you're replacing the galvanized pipe on a major artery, major road rather. Are you anticipating in the future doing Main Street also, which is galvanized pipes?
That's a county roadway. Typically, when the borough does a road reconstruction project, the borough would go through and replace the galvanized services. The county typically does not do that unless there's a cost-sharing agreement with the borough, and at that point, the borough water department is responsible for any necessary upgrades. But typically, when the county does a mill and overlay, they don't get involved with replacing water services.
Well, since the main road, I mean, Pulaski, as you well know, was cement underneath. And it's no matter how many times we've paved it, it always had problems. But, okay, now I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Steve?
Steve Malinowski, 28 Scarlet Drive in Parlin. First, I want to congratulate Mr. Melendez in asking the figures, because figures are important. They are budgeting, they are numbers to know, so we can plan what we're doing. That's number one. What the improvements were one of my questions, but the fundamental question after that is, one, kudos to get the grant. That's good to help us, provide the repairs that are necessary. What's the rate on the bonds that we're financing? Do we know?
Wayne? The bonds for this project has not been sold yet. We had a bond sale back in September, which was for projects that were, some of which were approved earlier this year and late last year. But the bond rate right now is our net interest cost over the life of the bond issue, which was 11 years. So this past issue, which we just sold, was approximately 1.9%, just under 2%.
Okay, so we're anticipating something in that range.
Right, yeah.
That's my question, because financing is important.
Yeah, there's only $1 million. There's
$1,500,000.
$450,000 being financed by bonds. Okay, the rest of it is either down payment money that's required at $73,000, and there's $1,075,000
In grant.
grants. Yeah.
Yep, that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other questions? Being no other questions, entertain a motion to
I move
close
the
the public portion.
I move the public hearing be closed, the ordinance adopted on second and final reading, and advertised according to law.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Novak,
Yes.
Buchanan,
Yes.
Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Lembo,
Yes.
Melendez.
Yes.
Next item?
Public hearing ordinance number 377-17, and ordinance supplementing and amending ordinance number 257-14, fixing the salaries of certain borough officials, officers, and employees for the years 2013, 14, 15, and 2016 as set forth in the SAM's bargaining agreement.
This time, I'm going to open the public portion for questions or comments on this ordinance. Are there any questions or comments? There being no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move the public hearing be closed, the ordinance adopted on second and final reading, and advertised according to law.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Novak,
Yes.
Buchanan,
Yes.
Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Lembo,
Yes.
Melendez.
Yes.
Under new business?
Introduction of the following ordinances, ordinance number 378-17, and ordinance amending Chapter 7, Traffic of the Revised General Ordinances of the Borough of Saraville.
Who's second on public safety?
I think I'm on that committee.
All right, would you take this, Penn?
Yeah, absolutely. Mayor, I move the ordinance be approved on first reading, advertised according to law, and a public hearing be held on October 23rd.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Lembo,
Yes.
Buchanan,
Yes.
Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Melendez,
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Next item?
Introduction of ordinance number 379-17, and ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 12 of the Revised General Ordinances of the Borough of Saraville to amend Section 12-3.5, Property Rental and Resale Inspection.
Pat, if you would.
Mayor, I move the ordinance be approved on first reading, advertised according to law, and a public hearing be held on October 23rd.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Lembo,
Yes.
Buchanan,
Yes.
Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Melendez,
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Next item, Jessica?
Introduction of ordinance number 380-17, ordinance of the Borough of Saraville and the County of Middlesex, State of New Jersey, authorizing a special emergency appropriation pursuant to NJSA 4-53 to provide funds for the preparation of an approved tax map, authorizing the issuance of special emergency notes in the amount of $350,000 to fund the special emergency appropriation and providing for other details of said issue.
Mary, if you would.
Yep, I move the ordinance be approved on first reading, advertised according to law for a meeting to be held on October 23rd prevailing time.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilpersons Novak?
Yes.
Buchanan?
Yes.
Kilpatrick?
Yes.
Lembo?
Yes.
Melendez?
Yes.
This time I'm going to open the public portion on consent agenda items. Barbara?
Barbara Kilcummins, 22 Schmidt Street. You know that equipment is near and dear to me, and I'm always picking up on something that isn't absolutely necessary. But 2017-295 Vector model, is this for the water department? Or
Yes.
what is it? And almost $500,000 for one truck.
Dan?
That's what the cost is, Barbara.
How many other vehicles do we have like this? And is it for the water department?
It's the
This
water
is for,
department.
what'd you say, it's not for public works, it's for water.
Yeah,
It's
water
for
and
water.
sewer.
Oh, water
Yeah.
department,
Water
water department, yes. I'm sorry, water department. I heard someone say public works, that's fine.
How many do we have like this?
None in the water department.
Did we have one in the past?
No.
Was it damaged with Sandy?
No, not to my knowledge.
So what is this truck
Was it,
going
was
to?
that one,
Yes, we did have one damaged with Sandy.
but that was in public works, wasn't it? That wasn't in
No,
water,
no,
that was in
that
water?
was the water and sewer
Okay.
department.
That's
That
what I
was the
thought.
Okay.
It was parked over on MacArthur
Yeah.
Avenue, correct?
At the time, we had two. One
Okay.
of them was left behind or not removed and
Right.
quick enough, and it
Did we ever retrieve any insurance money on that?
I believe so, some residual value. The truck was not new, it was an older model, so it didn't have much value, market value to it, so the amount that we received from insurance was not that much.
Not substantial?
Yeah.
Because it just seems like an exorbitant fee to pay for one vehicle. I know it probably, it cleans, correct me if I'm wrong, like catch basins, whatnot, or?
Yes.
And I think we're in dire need of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Are there any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? Being no
Mayor,
other,
if I may, I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
being no other questions or comments, I'll take a motion to close the public portion.
Before we move on, maybe this would have been better in old business, but if you all remember, September 11th, I believe it was, a couple of council meetings ago, I had read a resolution, or actually, in reference to our chairperson of the planning board. This is going back a while. And it was in reference to some of the conduct and behavior that was taking place on that board. And tonight, what I have is I would like to actually read that resolution again in full. And being that we are at this point within our COA situation with our developer's fee, I think it's an appropriate time. And to ask the mayor if you have given any consideration to the request that was brought to this floor about removing or requesting the resignation of Mr. Thomas Tyus, the chairman of the Saraville Planning Board. If you would all entertain me for just a few short moments, I would like to read that
Hey,
resolution.
Vicki, before you go, I never received a copy of it.
I do have copies here now for you.
Well, give it to
So-
Terry, and then she'll
I have enough
present it to
copies
me.
for everybody.
She'll present it to me.
Well,
But
I would like to
this
ask-
is a bit irregular, because usually we would get these on Friday. When did this come in?
My apologies, I just printed this, and I had asked that Terry print it and leave a hard copy on my desk, on my section.
What do you want done tonight?
Well, we brought it up, and actually, we took a vote here to ask that you consider, because it is ultimately you that has the power in order to remove this chairperson for his conduct on the board. What I'm asking you to do, Mayor, is to move forward and ask for the resignation of Mr. Thomas Ty from the Saraville Planning Board.
We're still in the consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why I said I don't know which is the most appropriate place.
We need to close the public portion on the consent agenda resolutions and adopt them as they are listed.
But before we go ahead and do so, if I would ask that you just read the resolution, consent agenda resolution, before you tonight, not the one in the packet. I had one resolution that I had to remove, and that was on the tax maps, the engineer preparing the tax maps, because that fee
What
has to,
number?
that would have been 306. The one that's before you tonight is the correct one. The one in the packet, in
Oh,
your
okay.
manila folder, has the resolution that has to be removed.
Terry, I
Thank you.
apologize if it was out of order. That's why I said I
Mayor.
probably,
Mayor, I move the public portion be closed and the consent agenda resolutions be approved on roll call vote as listed.
Well, Terry, what was your request? Do you want everybody to read 306?
No, the resolution that is the
Okay.
agendas that are out for the public and that were put before you tonight are the correct ones. There was one that was removed from the one that you received on Friday.
So a motion made, is there a second?
Received a second from Councilwoman Novak.
Roll call?
Councilperson Buchanan?
Yes.
Kilpatrick? Yes. Lembo?
Yes.
Melendez?
Yes.
Novak?
Yes.
Is this like normal where we have a resolution introduced
It's a
on the night
memorialization.
of the... Yeah, but we never had a written form of it. We only had the conversation and the generalities.
well, I'll put this,
I
I'll
don't
let
know
you
what
know
you
when
want me
you
to do
can
with it,
present
Mayor.
it.
Excuse me?
I'll let you know when you can present it. But first, I want you to take it and send it to the DCA and get a legal opinion on it.
so
Because I don't think it really meets legal muster. I could be wrong, but
in reference to,
what you're asking.
I'm asking at this point, okay, and if you want it presented again at the next council meeting, that's fine. I wanted to know if, and this is a memorialization of the request that I had made back on September 11th, to have Mayor Kennedy O'Brien request the resignation of Mr. Thomas Ty as chairman of the Saraville Planning Board. I can put that entire question again before you, if you like, and then we can turn around and have this resolution prepared at the next meeting. I'm fine with that. I'm just wondering.
Well, that would be the protocol, but I would like the DCA to give a legal opinion on the legality of the ordinance, whether I can ask someone that's been appointed to step down.
Well, how about I put this before you again, because it's my understanding that you make the appointments to the planning board. It's my understanding that you have the ability to remove or appoint anybody on that board at any time. It's also my understanding, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. It's also my understanding that in the event that there is a hearing on this, that you ultimately are the judge and jury, and you could reappoint Mr. Ty or anyone that same exact day. So what I'm doing is I'm appealing to you, Mayor O'Brien, for the following reasons, and the same reasons that I stated on the previous meeting. Because at the March 1st, 2017 meeting.
Vicky, can we hold this over till the next meeting? I mean, you seem to be really hell-bent on reading this into the record,
Well,
which
because
you're
it
gonna do anyway. But that being said, I do need to get a legal opinion on this from the Department of Community Affairs. On top of that, I happen to think this whole thing is an inner Democratic Party fight, and which is really a waste of the public's time, but I guess I have to humor you.
If I may, Mayor, for a second, I actually don't agree with you. I don't think this has anything to do with
Vicky, neither one of
politics.
us are attorneys, so.
No, but I would like to say, with all due respect, I don't believe that this has anything to do with political anything. I think, and I know, that the reason I brought this forth is because I have serious concerns about the way in which the planning board and this one particular gentleman, the chairman, is conducting business. And I have serious concerns for the people of Saraville because his actions and his decisions and the way in which the meetings have been conducted under his chairmanship are in violation of certain state statutes. And one of the things that I had read and stated at the previous meeting, and it's listed here under letter G, we can turn around and just resubmit this at our next meeting, but we did not enter into appropriate closed session meetings. I'll eliminate right now for the public all of the disparaging comments that were made to residents. But there are some serious issues that I have that directly relate to our COA potential litigation and the way things were put together. I had asked you to consider, and if you
I never received it, Vicky. This is like something that's been waiting for weeks since you talked about it. So now I need to
So I'll
find
ask
out if
this.
it's worth the paper it's written on.
I'll just say
I
this.
do believe to the core of my being, you can't get more political than that. And the irony is, this isn't even a Democratic-Republican issue. This is a Democrat-Democrat issue,
This is a
which makes it
resident issue.
even more appalling.
No,
Well, see, Mayor, you're bringing
Mayor,
politics into it, and I have to.
No, this,
I have
I'm
to-
stating what this is. He called you fatso, and then he refused to contribute to
Thank you for
Mary and
continuing
Vicky's
to bringing this up.
campaign. So I
Mayor,
think,
I have to-
yeah,
I
it's
have to-
political.
Well,
I have
and
to
now this
commend
is why.
Councilwoman Kilpatrick because it's not a political issue, but as you could see, we're
It's-
looking
it-
beyond
it's
political
100%
parties.
political.
We're looking beyond political parties to do the right thing.
No. This is you guys eating your own.
If I may for a minute,
But
Mayor.
I am going to have this submitted. I'd like this presented to the council the way it would normally go in the Friday package before the meeting.
Point of order at this point, Councilwoman Kilpatrick
Well, she could
has a
read whatever
resolution
she
in front of
wants,
her,
but
which is at that point in time in the
it's a
meeting.
political statement, not a
Mayor-
government statement.
Mayor, we have discussed this at an agenda meeting. The way we do most of the consent agenda resolutions are actually,
I'm taking no action on this till I get other legal opinion, because, first of all, it's everything that keeps people out of politics. It's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible thing you're doing.
when you have.
To your own people.
Mayor, maybe that shows that we have genuine concerns
No,
about
you don't.
this.
No,
We
you have-
have
you have- you
somebody
have
sitting
self- you
here.
have
and-
self-interest.
Mayor, can you please stop interrupting?
No, he can't.
Well, I thought Vicky was
I had a
reading
point of order and
something.
asked her-
I
I
thought
was,
Vicky
but-
was reading something.
I was, but
Then
I
you
was
go on.
unfortunately interrupted, Mayor.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Go ahead, Vic.
This is concerning people. At no time was this political. And as far as one of my people, the residents of this town are my people. And I don't sit there and weigh whether or not I represent them based on the color they wear or the politician they follow or what letter appears before their name in a voting booth or whatever. What I have a concern with, and this is why I brought this up on September 11th. And now, Mayor, I wasn't going to read the entire thing, but I want to make sure that people understand that your statements are not accurate. This is why I asked you, Mayor, to take a leadership position and ask for the resignation of Mr. Thomas Ty. And this is why. Because at the March 1st, 2017 meeting, Mr. Ty embarrassed a resident because the resident didn't know where a certain firehouse was located. Letter B. I asked you to remove Thomas Ty because on June 21st, 2017, Mr. Ty made disparaging remarks to a resident who expressed concerns regarding the affordable housing litigation. Number 3, on the June 21st meeting, Mr. Ty made a comment about money and council seats. Letter D, at the June 21st meeting, the planning board members asked Mr. Ty if he would be attending the next council meeting to defend the planning board's actions in reference to the COA litigation, to which Mr. Ty replied, and I quote, "I don't want to smack someone." Letter E. At the same meeting, Mr. Ty made disparaging remarks regarding Council President Mr. Buchanan and his map reading skills and his person. F. Mr. Ty in meetings violated Open Public Meeting Act by not entering into executive session in accordance with the statute and announcing reasons for executive session. Letter G. Mr. Ty violated NJSA 10:4-10 regarding statements and minutes of adequate notice as said statute requires, and I quote, "At the commencement of every meeting of a public body, the person presiding shall announce publicly and shall cause to be entered into the minutes of the meeting an accurate statement to the effect adequate notice of the meeting has been provided, specifying the time, place in which such notice was provided." Mr. Ty violated the same. Letter H. Mr. Ty violated NJSA 10:4-13. In particular, no public body shall exclude the public from any meeting to discuss any matter described in this statute until the public body first adopts a resolution at the public meeting to which the subject shall be described. which resolution shall state the general nature of the subject to be discussed in an executive session. The resolution must be passed at the public meeting for which notice has been given. Mr. Tai, as chairman, failed to comply with said statute. And letter I. Mr. Tai violated NJSA 10:4-10 and 10:4-13 in particular by violating said statutes, which caused or may cause the meetings to be voided as there was no resolution at the public meeting to go into executive session or to discuss the general nature of the topic to be discussed, nor was there a vote to go into closed session. Mr. Tai conducted on January 18, 2017, April 19, 2017, and June 7, 2017, violated said statutes. Now, Mayor, if that, in your opinion, is some type of political play, I am
Vicky,
really
from you,
concerned.
absolutely, 100%.
This is concerning, considering that it is that
guys-
planning board
If
that was the
people don't
sole
play on
ex-
your team, you eat your own.
Mayor, I was speaking. I wish you
Well,
wouldn't
ask me a
interrupt.
question, I hadn't finished.
Mayor, it is that board that developed the COA plan, the affordable housing plan that we have before us, that is bringing residents out constantly.
You voted yes on it.
Mayor,
You voted yes on it. Everybody sitting up here voted yes on it. Now, all of a sudden, there's a million problems with it. We're spending an awful lot of money on Susan Gruhl, who has never attended a meeting, never submitted a report
here
to
at the
this,
last
to
several-
this board or to the
She was here.
master.
Mayor, she was here at the last several meetings. However, Mayor, and I really wish you wouldn't interrupt me. I have given you respect, and actually, the one time
Vicky, you ask a question. You want a
Mayor.
yes or no answer?
I haven't asked the question yet, Mayor. I just wanted to put
I'm
on
still
the
on the
record.
last question.
I'm just waiting so that way the residents here, this is not political.
Vicky, go ahead, finish the diatribe, and then we can move forward.
I'm trying, Mayor. I'm trying, Mayor.
I know you are. Go ahead. Go ahead, give it a try.
I really hope that people see this for what it is. It's a concern. It's a problem. Our planning board needs to be held to the highest level of volunteers and appointed officials. Mayor, I'm asking for your leadership here. I think the residents are asking for your leadership here. Please, consider calling for the resignation so that we can move forward and get a board that is going to act in our best interests. We can resubmit this and you can have it in writing at the next meeting. That's fine. You can have anyone look at it that you want, but at the end, Mayor, you are the judge and jury on this. And I ask respectfully that you do what is right for the residents here. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to open the public portion. Terry, so send that to the acting commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs for a legal opinion on that, and then include it in the packet for the next council meeting. At this time, I'm going to open the public portion. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for letting me ask some questions. I'm Janice Benedetto from 1 Thomas Avenue in the Melrose section. I wanted to know where we stood now that National Lead was awarded intervenor status at the court case. What is going on as far as an appeal process?
Counselor?
Yeah, I can answer that question. The judge entered an order allowing that. I have not seen the final order. The final order has not been entered yet, and I can't say much further than that pending this litigation.
I appreciate the answer, and I understand the need for privacy and.
The order, no court order has been entered, even though it's been submitted. No final order has been entered.
All right. Also, the two ordinances. 363-17 and 366B-17, of which I don't know which version that was. And I understand the court ordered that they had to be passed, and I see they're not up for discussion tonight. Were they passed in like private council session, executive session?
No, ma'am. The court ordered it in its decision of September 27th or 28th. But again, I have not seen the order. No further order or final order has been entered yet, and I can't comment any further on that.
All right, I appreciate that. How long do these things generally take? A couple of weeks, or?
You know, the order was submitted last week, and Judge Natale just hasn't signed any type of order that was presented.
All right. And regarding the joint agency and authority and committee October 2nd meeting that was, I'm not sure if it was canceled or postponed due to conflict of interest as reported in the Home News Tribune. What exactly does that all mean? Is it canceled? Is it postponed? And what was the conflict of interest?
Well, I think all the attorneys from the respective boards voiced objection, including myself, about conflict of interest, about very serious potential litigation, confronting individuals, confronting residents, as well as board members. So I think that kind of answers your question.
So in reality, it's really canceled. We'll never see it rescheduled.
Not until the legal issues are worked out, yes, ma'am.
All right, even though I understand that certain meetings did have other boards in the past attend, like the planning board.
I know the planning board and zoning board attorneys were looking into that because there was reference made, I think, by Mr. Robinson about historically these type of meetings taking place.
All right. I also, going back to National Lead and the intervenor status, now National Lead doesn't build apartments, they don't build houses. All right. What does that actually give them as far as, you know, it was discussed as being superpowers and things of that sort? I mean, do they have that right to sell the property and then pass it on to a purchaser? Do they lease the property out?
Again, ma'am, with all due caution, you know, I can't comment on the pending litigation.
Well, what's the definition of an intervenor then?
An intervenor is an application by a party into a lawsuit to have their, in this case, property issues addressed.
And it's not a specific list of rights or privileges?
There are privileges that they can participate in the litigation, that's correct.
And has anybody approached them as far as the Open Space Committee's recommendation, you know, to purchase the property?
I know that the Open Space Committee was evaluating that. I know that no value has been presented to National Lead. I personally did speak to Counsel for National Lead. They expressed an interest, but yet I know that Counsel for Sarah also was talking to National Lead about that possibility. I wasn't privy to those conversations.
And I know that quotes were going to be obtained for an appraiser for that property. Were the quotes from appraisal firms obtained?
Well, that was the recommendation, and that's what the council voted on, but I don't think it was
that's what we're waiting on, correct? We're waiting for those quotes to be submitted.
We actually went out and were soliciting quotes?
Yes.
All right. And I wanted to thank Mr. Cornell for getting the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection Agency report from the state and having it, you know, delivered to me and answering my questions on it and being very helpful in that matter. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for continuing to answer my questions and educate the public on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Mike?
Mike Diadio, and I'm the chairman of SARA. Mayor, I just wanted to comment on Mr. Council President Buchanan's statement that not all SARA redevelopment zones be put exempt from this fee ordinance. And for the council's edification, just to give you a little idea of what we can do and the powers that we have on SARA, when you put this in your ordinance, you're taking control of the fees away from yourself and away from SARA. SARA is a board that can request fees. we can make that part of a redevelopment agreement, and the council can have the power on whether or not they want to take the fees, increase the fees, or do away with them, or make a applicant exempt. By putting it in your ordinance, you're putting it, as Mr. Lembo said, in county's hands and state's hands, and I think that's a huge mistake. The decisions of Sayreville, according to a redevelopment zone, I think should stay with the council. I sincerely recommend that you consider keeping this as your decision. Take a recommendation from Sarah. That's what we do. We recommend to you whether you should take these fees or not, just like we did with our recommendation for the pilot program for the Point, with the $19 million for a school and the amenities that we recommended. We recommended, it's your decision. If you don't make it exempt in this ordinance, it's a huge mistake. You don't want to create red tape for developers, especially in redevelopment zones. Okay?
I understand, Mike, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree. The question that I had in my mind was regarding the Gondek and how you had it in your redevelopment agreement, and then it was pulled out by the zoning board, by the planning board.
You're right.
And that's
in
what
hindsight,
my focus is on.
In hindsight,
right.
Sarah should have put the number of units we wanted in that application. The mistake Sarah made at that time was trusting the planning board to come up with the legal number, which they didn't. Since then, we have put the number of units that need to be put in an application to the planning board. And that's the plan that they're presented with. Now, just to change hats, I am also the deputy chairman of the Democratic Party, Mayor, and we did not seek nor would we accept any contribution for the campaign for Novak or Kilpatrick. Thank you. That's
Steve.
I meant for Mr. Ty.
Thank you. I thought you asked Kennedy for money.
Steve Melineski, 28 Scarlet Drive, Parlin. I want to go back to Ms. Kilpatrick's statement. And this is only my second meeting, and I am totally, totally shocked. I'm listening to Mike, sorry, I don't remember your last name.
Diadio.
Mike. And hearing all this really resonates with me that we should really, and it's been my experience to have this type of reporting, and I know, Pat, you're going to go back in the minutes, to have these people come in front of us, hearing dropping the ball, so to speak, time and time again, that's put us in this position, makes me wonder, should we have more representation here, Mr. Mayor, by that committee so that we could vet it without confusion and the such. I don't believe it's political. I think it's factual from what I'm hearing. And again, I apologize. This is my second meeting, but I intend to be involved and stay involved as long as I can. If I can help, I will definitely help. But this sounds to me like something we need to get a handle on very quickly. So thank you for bringing it up.
Ruth Ann?
I'm Ruth Ann Mahoney at 2 Gerard Place, Portland. I am that March 1st person at the planning board who was made a fool of. I was the only one left there. It was the end of the night, and I certainly was in the way. I was disrespected. I was told I didn't know where the Melrose Firehouse was. Yes, I do. I was told I was taking up pizza time. I went home. I was upset. I'm not a political person. I'm here at these meetings to say my piece, and that's it, and that's what I was there for that night. I am totally, totally upset that this is being taken as a political piece, especially my March 1st appearance at the planning board. And that's why I don't go back.
Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the discussion you had on the fee ordinance and the comments that Mr. Daddio made earlier are a great example of why there ought to be joint meetings. So that these things could be, so he could come up here not as a member of the public, but he could sit at a table with the rest of his board and discuss these things. And I would ask Mr. DuPont, if it were said up front that no matters of litigation were to be discussed at that meeting, would your opinion have been the same?
I guess the problem is just out of caution that in the event that the meeting spiraled out of control and there were specific sites. You know, I've seen lawsuits by developers, they're called SLAP lawsuits, I'm sure you know, right? And what happens is that individuals are sued and they're not covered by insurance, they're covered by their personal savings account. And I've seen that bankrupt people. And I've also seen the appellate courts realizing what they are, which is a deterrent to free speech. Knowing that and then hearing all of the attorneys from Sarah to the planning board to the zoning board voice objection or questioning it, that's the reason, God bless you. That's the reason for the opinion here.
Well, I might understand why you would say that those presiding over the meetings might not be able to control them. But I would ask, does that not also apply individually to the boards? Or only when they meet in a joint session? The potential for litigation?
No, potential, as you know, Mr. Robinson, can occur at any point in
That's
time,
right.
right? So it's not a particular point.
So it can happen whether they meet in joint session or they meet as their own body.
Yeah, but there's a greater likelihood of possible litigation when you have a joint session. I know, Mr. Robinson, you had indicated that historically there had been a precedent set. And I know that the planning board and the zoning board were going to look into that precedent.
And I will tell you that in those years, we didn't have the kind of litigation that we have now.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna also suggest to you it's because things were discussed and decided, and things were run better back then because of those meetings. I mean, the number of cases that we've been involved with, that the governing body and the planning board has been involved with, and the millions of dollars is just astronomical. But that's not what I came up to talk about, though. I do want to talk about the affordable housing. And in reviewing my notes and the charts that were put out and presented to the judge, I saw that no credit was given for Gillette Manor. And my first thought was, well, maybe that's because that happened years ago. But there were carryover credits given for Lakeview, which preceded that by a number of years. And I asked Mr. Leon Cavella earlier if he knew why, and he wasn't sure. Does anybody here know why? And before I ask it, let me just suggest that, and he said he wasn't familiar with it. And I can understand that. He wasn't around when it was approved. When we've been served with this suit, had the planning board talked to the housing authority and the Office on Aging, or Sarah and the housing authority, rather, at some point in time, somebody might have said, they might have even met in Gillette Manor. And somebody might have said, hey, what's this building? Oh, 100 units of senior housing. Maybe we should get some credit for this. So I'd like to know why no credit was given, and did we look for credit there?
Go ahead.
I think Mr. Leon Cavello and his discussion with Mr. Sachs and his knowledge as planner probably could address that.
He still doesn't know.
There was, from my point of view, there was never a look at Gillette Manor because there was nothing referenced anywhere that I could find. So I think there was some information, if I recall, I don't know exactly when, but in the second certification maybe, which would have been in the 80s, but I've been told by that the situation is from the 90s. It wasn't built in the 80s. There was Lakeview in the 80s, of course, and we did get some carry credits for that in the magnitude, I believe it was 146 units that the court-ordered planner looked at and agreed that those were carryover credits we should be awarded. What happened with Gillette Manor, I don't know. As I said to Mr. Robinson, I haven't seen that. I wasn't even aware of how many units it was. I thought it was around 100. Turns out it was around 100.
100.
There's
Okay, so something, not to belabor it, but something was obviously missed. And as we know, we saw in the letter from Susan Gruhl, she found 116 units that lowered our obligation. I think there might be some more units here that if we take them into account, and I don't know if they're going to be 1-for-1 or maybe there's 25% credit. I'm not sure, but every single one, as we know, is either 5 or 6, and the number's in dispute. I think it's about 7. Some people say it's 5 or 6. But every unit we get credit for is 5, 6, or 7 market rate units that don't have to be built. So I'd ask that we take a look at that, because that might change the bottom line. That might change a lot of what the planning board is spinning their wheels, and the council spinning their wheels on doing. Mayor, I want to ask you a question very similar to the one that you asked Council President Buchanan. Do you think we have enough affordable housing in Sayreville?
I've answered that several times. I've made that statement, Jim. Sayreville has a great. If you go to the neighborhoods, we have old housing stock, which sells for under $300,000, sells for under $250,000. It has been my opinion that we don't need more of it.
So you think we have enough then?
Well, I don't think we need to use Perth
Okay.
Amboy as the beacon of light
All
up
right.
on the hill. I
Thank
think
you.
we are on to, Jim, I'll let you know when I'm done talking.
Oh, I actually asked a yes
will
or no
let you
question,
know
Mayor,
when
and you
I'm done-
answered it.
I will let you know when I'm done talking.
This is the public portion,
I
Mayor.
will
I
let
asked a
you
question,
know
and you
when I
answered
am
it to
done
my
talking.
satisfaction.
Jim, I think he got it backwards deliberately. But all that being said, I think Sayreville does quite fine. I don't think we need to emulate Perth Amboy. They have their own identity. They are far more densely populated than we are, and their housing needs are different than ours. We have a higher per capita income. It's just a different. It's a different song altogether. That being said, if I had my dithers, would I attract more low-income housing? I remember you telling me that Winding Wood Apartments was built on the auspices that it would be for the children of Sayreville who could not afford to build a house. I remember you telling me that distinctly 20, 25 years ago. Maybe that was true at the time, but it's not true today. So, do I think we need more affordable housing? For what purpose? We have we have a surplus of affordable housing.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, let me go back to an issue that I've raised before, Heritage, which are the apartments at, help me, Town Lake, right? Now, that was a situation where, you recall, Kaplan got approval to build senior housing. He came in under the 2009 conversion statute. The 2009 conversion statute says you can change from senior housing to market rate housing if 20% is affordable. That's what the statute says. 20% needs to be affordable, and that would be about 37 units. Okay? The planning board denied that. Kaplan was committed to those 37 units. He had to be to apply. He sued. The judge, in his decision, said that the purpose of the conversion statute is to allow the conversion of age-restricted housing to non-age-restricted housing and to provide low and moderate income housing. That was the purpose of the statute, what the judge said. He went on to say the cost of both renting and home ownership remains unaffordable to a large percentage of New Jersey residents, including those who made final contributions to their communities, such as teachers, nurses, police officers, firefighters, and the general workforce population. Now, this part of his order is very important. In order to obtain the conversion, Heritage is required and will comply with the 20% set aside to satisfy the intent of the conversion statute. The law says there have to be 37 affordable units there. The builder agreed to do 37 units of affordable housing there. The judge ordered that there be 37 units of affordable housing there. The borough ignored that order. The borough ignored that order. And what we know is it's not just 37 units of affordable housing there. That 37 units of affordable housing that we don't have means we now must build 237 market rate apartments in order to make up for that 37. And that out of 237 units, if you get 120 kids out of those 237 units, and the cost per pupil, Wayne and I talked about this earlier, is about $15,000 a student in Sayreville. That comes to $1.8 million that the taxpayers of this town will pay if only 120 kids come out of there, and that's a very conservative estimate. Mayor, you talked earlier about the number of kids coming out of Winding Wood, so you know how many kids come out of apartments. So that $1.8 million and that 120 kids is a very conservative estimate. And that happened because the planning board disregarded the law and the judge's order. And maybe, Mayor, it's because the planning board that you appoint understands your feeling that regardless of the law, we have enough affordable housing in Sayreville. In your long-winded response, that's what you said twice. We have enough. Well, the law, the judge doesn't consider that we have enough. So my point, Mayor,
take your seat.
my point, Mayor, is this.
Take your seat, Jim.
We need to find a way
Please
to
take your
recoup
seat.
those 37 units.
Take your
And
seat.
since Kaplan committed to that, since the judge said he had to do it, since he has filed as an intervener somewhere else, maybe those 37 units ought to be applied to one of the other projects that the judge just approved. And that will eliminate 237 units of market rate housing, which will save the borough of Sayreville $1.8 million in school costs alone. Not
Thank
talking
you,
about
Jim.
all the other costs.
Wrap it up.
$1.8 million. Mayor, $1.8 million is important to me,
Jim, you
and
make
you
this
took a
stuff
lot of
up.
my time in your pontification
Sit
when
down.
I asked you a yes or no question.
Jim,
So, Mayor,
why do I always have to have a police officer here when you're here? Right?
you like the
Mayor,
power,
because
perhaps,
you
Mayor.
don't like
Mayor,
anybody that
perhaps you like
state
the power.
facts.
You're done.
Mayor, may I ask a
Okay.
question? Mayor, I'm going to ask you a question.
Now.
You just said that Mr. Robinson makes stuff up as he goes. What exactly is that? The numbers don't lie.
You know, Dan,
My question,
if you
I
were
have
a
a question,
smarter
Mayor.
person, I'd explain it.
Oh,
Oh,
there you go.
no.
See, here's my
This-
here's
this
my
is
issue.
why he
Here's my
likes
issue,
Tom
Mayor, if I
Tighe.
could. Here's my issue. You know, Tom Tighe made a comment about me, and I understand this is the public portion. I'm going to take some time right now. Tom Tighe made a comment about me, and I'm a public figure. I've been called a lot worse. I'm a state investigator, and I've been called a hell of a lot worse than that, and I'm fine with that. I understand that. However, the mayor can, Tom Tighe came up here and apologized, and I accept his apology. However, Mayor, you keep on reiterating his comments up here and reinforcing his comments to berate me. Now you're going to do it again. While your board continues to violate the law and judge's orders, and you sit here and do nothing and ask to send it to DCA. I'm going to ask our attorney to send to DCA everything that has happened with this planning board and with you at the helm. I believe that you've had you've shirked your duties and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing as the head of this town.
Dan, it's gonna be a good campaign slogan when you run for mayor.
So my question, Mayor, is this. What can we do about those 37 units?
I'm done with you, Jim.
My
Just
question,
wait
Mayor,
for you
is
to
this.
sit down.
What can we do about those 37 units that translate to 237 units that will cost us $1.8 million in school fees? What can we do, Mayor?
He doesn't want to answer that question because he's for the builders.
Really?
It's obvious he's for the builders.
Really?
Yes, Mayor.
That's unusual. Jim,
Mayor, I
sit
don't want to
down.
get political. I just want an
I
answer.
don't go to lunch
You-
with anybody.
I'm done with you.
When
Jim.
I asked the question earlier, you were very happy to go on for 10 minutes. What are we going to do
is-
about those 37 units
down.
that Kaplan agreed to do, that the law says we have to do, and that the judge ordered? I'll come back.
No,
I think everybody in the room should come up and ask that question on their time.
Go ahead.
And the mayor still will
Thank you,
ignore
Mayor.
you.
Thank you. Yes, dear.
Wow.
Regina Lodato, 20 Frazee Avenue in South Amboy. I would like to know if Sarah could buy property here in Sayreville and put the affordable housing that we're looking for.
Jay, John?
If I understand your question, can Sarah
Sarah.
buy property
No,
Right.
Sayreville.
and put the affordable housing?
Sarah.
All the affordable housing
Yes,
in one place?
sure.
Okay. We've talked about that with the, with Mr. Sachs, myself, and the court-appointed planner, Betsy McKenzie. The same situation was proffered by Mr. Robinson a while back at one of the meetings, maybe 5 or 6 meetings ago, about taking the Mako property and using that property at one time. I don't know if he's still profiting, that situation. But the answer we got from the court-ordered planner was that was not what we talked about in the preliminary agreement for the litigation. She thought it was still a good idea to distribute it throughout the town, and so my answer to you would be that that's not what COA litigation wanted us to do.
Okay. I want to know, by Dunkin' Donuts on Main Street, there's all houses just went up. I don't know anything about them. I haven't been coming to your meetings, so I don't know anything about them. I want to know, is there any affordable housing in that particular group of houses?
Okay, I'm not sure where that, can you be a little more specific?
You go by,
Kennedy Boulevard?
By Kennedy Boulevard.
Kennedy Boulevard.
Oh,
Gillette project. The new Gillette project.
Okay.
the new Gillette product.
Kennedy.
okay, I got you. All right, that,
There should have been affordable housing. It's recent, because I never saw it before till I started coming to the meetings.
well, there should have been affordable housing, possibly. We didn't have an ordinance that would develop the development fees yet, which we just approved now. So he
But
didn't have it at the
do you
time.
understand that this is what we, as an individual, I'm only a mother. I never had to go to work. I didn't have to do anything. I just stayed home. But I'm hearing these things personally. Somebody, these professional people, they have more professional income, they have brains, and they don't seem to know that these are things that they should be doing, whether they're on the planning board, they're on the mayor's council. I'm sick and tired of hearing that Sayreville doesn't know what to do.
No,
We
I
don't know
think-
how to get money.
I think the planning board knows what it's doing, the council knows what it's doing. All right, so to say that we don't know what we're doing is not fair.
I'm not saying you don't know what you're
Well,
doing.
you kinda just
You're
said
making
that.
a mistake every time something happens. To me, if I had that many houses going up, and I knew you had to have affordable housing, I would have saw that builder and I would have said, where's my affordable housing? And I'm only a mother. I'm not a hard worker, I'm not anything, but I know it cost you. It cost you. It cost you. Anytime you want to do something on your own property, I put a 3-car garage up on my backyard, and I know I knocked at each door, and I asked each neighbor, do you have any complaints about me putting up a 3-car garage? And they said no. When I needed a street, I called Freddie Kurtz, and I said, how do I get a street? He told me, you get curbing and sidewalk. I knocked on every door. Every neighbor gave me the money, and we got curbing and sidewalk. And the next week, we had a brand new street. Do you understand? I'm only one person. But if you have to do something, somebody should be able to do it. And every day. I can't understand it. Do you want me to come over here and talk to some of these builders and see if they'll give us affordable housing? I mean, it's sad. It's sad. It's sad when you think about it. I know a lot of these people. I've been voting for some of these people. And I've had contact with different people in town. I can't understand that how everybody can see what we're looking for and we can't get it. I'm worried about Cross Avenue. I know that it's not a good place. And it's not good to put all those houses up. But we have no boundaries because National Lead's not going to sell us the property. And the town is going to sell their property to National Lead so they can get their houses and get their affordable housing.
Well, National Lead doesn't have any affordable housing we're doing right now.
What?
Because they own the property?
They own the property. And we don't know where that's going. We've talked about that, I think, in the past few sessions.
Well,
in terms of there may be a difference.
thank you for giving me the time to tell you
okay.
how I feel, but I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart.
Jane?
Ken Olszewski, 108 North Edward Street. The last guy I'd like to be in this community is Beninado from Club Benet. He seems to not know anybody, so he's the only poor slob that's had to build affordable housing in this town, I guess in the last 30 years. And I just want to say I'm a little unique compared to what I've heard tonight. Nobody has ever said anything disparaging about me, so I hope it doesn't start at this session up here tonight. But Mayor, at the last meeting, and also in the newspaper a month or two ago, I've heard you sing the praises of the planning board. And I'm not here to disparage them personally. From what you say, it sounds like they're the kind of people that read the good book from Friday till Monday, and that's how their weekend goes, and they want to build a dream house here one day with a picket fence and a rambling rose. And maybe that's what they are, and good for them. But what I don't have an answer to, and pretty much several other people tonight brought the same thing up. I don't want to be repetitious, but I'm the guy at the last meeting that talked about the newspaper article from February 3rd, 2011 on the Heritage Lake development. And what Mr. Robinson and probably others have said tonight, that they were required by law to build 20% affordable housing. And it simply hasn't happened. And I had asked the clerk, Terry, to send a copy of this newspaper article to every member of the governing body and to our borough attorney And, you know, first question I have, what happens? What's the punishment for people that are ignoring the law? What, can people just go around? Is this becoming another sanctuary city where we pick and choose what laws we want to defend and those we want to ignore? Mayor, your comments. We have enough affordable housing. Governor Christie said he doesn't want COA. I mean, these things that people are saying are costing us money. And it doesn't really matter what your opinion is on affordable housing or taking a poll of the residents and what they think of affordable housing. It's the law. As we can see now from the decision 2 weeks ago, it's what the judge thinks about affordable housing. And that the judge overruled the decisions here, and it looks like they're being that we're going to be set up to have to comply with all this affordable housing because it's the law, and it's not the affordable housing that we're concerned about as much as we've said over and over again. The market rate housing. You take the affordable housing and multiply it by 6 or 7, and the amount of market rate housing that's going to be here, and you've had residents, Steve here talking about what's the cost going to be to us? What will the cost be to improve the infrastructure? I asked about it several months ago. I told you we don't have the money because we don't have the tax structure, which you talked about, Mayor. I brought that up several months ago on my own. We're all residential here, and we don't have the taxes coming in to do this. What is this going to cost the residents? These people who are on fixed income, they don't all make big 6-figure salaries. They're not all feeding at the public trough. They're poor working class stiffs that we've got to look at that are going to have to spend this money. And I think as Councilman Buchanan said here tonight, he beat me to the punch, but Mayor, you're asking for a Department of Community Affairs to rule on some things here tonight. I'm asking the Department of Community Affairs. I'm seconding what Councilman Buchanan, he just beat me to the punch. I'm asking him to second. What's the story about the illegal planning board of 2016 when 3 members sat there that weren't appointed? They were never appointed. They were never sworn in. They sat there illegally. What's the Department of Community Affairs have to say about this? Who can the taxpayers of this town go to for recourse on this stuff? I mean, it's starting to get ridiculous. I guess I should strike the word starting and say it's becoming ridiculous over and over and over. And then to my question, Mayor, maybe through you to the attorney, what's the punishment for people violating the law here?
Well, again, I got your newspaper article. I've been trying to hunt down the court order from 2012 or 2011. And there is a recourse that the borough, I'd have to check with the planning board attorney, to file an application to enforce that order. There's something has to be done if in fact the order does exist and it was signed as you said.
I mean, it's over and over and over. This young lady here who just about the new Gillette Towers. There's no affordable housing in it. There's no affordable housing in Golden Age. How can we just ignore the law? Is this becoming a new form of sanctuary city? Saraville, New Jersey, the municipality that picks and chooses the laws they wish to enforce. That's my real question. And I think that's on the minds of a lot of people in this room and in this town, because you know what? It's costing us money. All these people sitting here are on the clock, we know. I mean, they may be wonderful people, but I know they're not sitting at this table free. And they haven't sat here free last meeting and the meeting before and the meeting before, all because we're not enforcing the law. The planning board hasn't enforced the law. That's it, pure and simple. Can anybody answer any of that? The mayor, again, as people have said, it's your planning board. You're a member of this planning board. You appoint all these
Ken,
people.
I remember when you were a Republican chairman and you and I would select the people to go on the planning board, then you had a fight with me and you went home. And then of course, you worked against me ever since. But there hasn't been a big change in personnel since you sat with me and worked on selecting people for the planning board. So when you go home, look in the mirror and say, why did we appoint those people? Because you were a big part of it when you were the Republican chairman. That being said, I think that they are a fine group of people. I think they embody the volunteer spirit of Sayreville. They're bright, they're intelligent. Most of them, I don't know the political party affiliation, because I didn't appoint them based on their party. They do yeoman's work, and they have to. And I have to tell you, this circus that's been going on for the last several months will be a deterrent to a lot of the residents who are thinking of getting involved, either as volunteers on the boards and commissions or thinking of running for political office. This is truly a shameful display of just awful baloney that's going on here, and we will certainly feel the effects in years to come. So that being said, I think we have a wonderful planning board, and I do remember sitting with you before you got mad and went home.
Nonsense,
No,
man. I did
that's
appoint the
100%
planning board.
true.
You appointed.
That-
I don't know
Oh,
half the
yes,
people
Ken.
on this planning
Ken,
board. That's
Ken,
nonsense. You appoint the planning board.
Ken.
Just answer
You
the
were
question,
there,
Mayor.
buddy.
The
You
question we
were
have
there.
is why are they
You.
violating the law?
You were there.
Please.
Why are they violating the
Why
law?
don't
I
you
don't
ask
know
him?
half
Why
the
don't
people
you
on this
ask him?
planning board.
Ken, you're getting old, buddy.
You're talking
May-
about
oh,
15 years ago.
Now
10
we
years
go.
ago, who
You're
were there?
old now.
It's always to blame somebody else.
No, I'll take
You need to look in the
And
mirror.
call
You
people
need to
names.
I like
look
the
in the
planning
mirror.
board.
Let me
I
tell you
think
why
they're
you need
great.
to look in the mirror.
I
Mayor.
think they're great.
Because you're feeding at the public trough with a $130,000 a year job given to you by
Really?
your friends, and it's probably a no-show job because you're always at the senior center, you're at Sunnyside, you're at the Colonial Diner, when most poor working stiffs are trying to go out there with a job to pay the taxes.
Ken,
So
you
that's
couldn't be
the
more
real
wrong.
issue. You're
As
ignoring
usual,
the people of this town,
you're making
Mayor,
it up
and
as
you're
you go,
violating
or you
the law.
honestly believe
You're
it.
violating the law, Mayor, and you don't have an answer.
right.
You're trying to blame somebody else for violating the law.
No,
Tell us the
no,
reason.
I take responsibility.
Thank you.
But
Thank
you sat right next to me,
Thank you
Ken.
for violating
You
the
sat
law.
right next
oh, yeah,
to me.
for violating the law. The law here, the affordable
buddy,
housing, Mayor.
you were
You're
there.
lying. You're making up
You were
stories,
there.
Mayor.
Yes, you
no,
were.
that's nonsense.
Yes, you were, Ken.
That's nonsense.
Mayor.
You have
Okay,
no
so
recourse
let's
for
move forward.
violating the law.
Mayor.
And
Let's
let's
move
move forward and take the responsibility. You're mayor.
I
and it's
appointed
your
the
job,
planning board.
and
I
you
like
want
the
to
it's the
planning
give
board.
public
business to this
portion.
town
Let him
a
speak.
lot of money.
Okay, you done?
I'm done now,
Okay.
yeah, after going
Thank
through
you.
your lies. Yes,
Thank you. You were there. All right, next, Jim. That was refreshing.
Mr. DuPont, I have a copy of Judge Hurley's July 23rd, 2010 decision, Heritage Town at Town Lake versus the Planning Board of the Borough of Sayreville.
That'd be great, Mr. Robinson.
That's
if
the
you-
one you're looking for?
Yeah, that's the one. If you could give me a copy of that, that would be great.
I'll be happy to email it to you in the morning. I'm
Thank you.
always happy to
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
to cooperate and help. But I do want to get back to those 37 units. Are you looking for this decision so that you can see what we can do to hold and Mr. Olszewski talked about holding accountable those people who violated the law. That's not what I'm
Oh,
talking
I
about.
think-
I'm talking about getting credit for those
Yeah, and I think
37
that's-
units.
That's the purpose behind it. I was going to send it to Mr. Leon Cavella.
Which
for the
will
purpose of
mean, and
determining-
I just want to reiterate this because the mayor was talking over me before and people might not have understood, those 37 units are not just 37 units. 37 units of affordable apartments translates to 237 units of market rate apartments, which, if we assume conservatively could produce 120 kids, will cost at about $15,000 a year, which is the 2013-14 cost per pupil in Sayreville. I don't know what it is now. It's probably gone up, but then it was 15,000.
Tom Bashada told me 12,000.
Then it was 15,000. Well,
No, I don't know. Tom Bashada, the school board member, told me 12,000. Either way, it's a fair amount of money.
I'm just basing it on something Mr. Kronowski and I looked up, but
Okay.
yeah, when you're talking 1.8 million, what's $2,000, Mayor? But that's the point. These 37 units can translate into $1.8 million in school taxes alone. So while it might not be important to some people, I think it's very important to others. So that's why I raised that issue for which you told me to sit down and shut up, Mayor. Now,
I didn't say shut up, Jim, but I did tell you to sit down.
And it is this. We have passed an ordinance so that in certain areas we have to do affordable housing. Have we passed an ordinance borough-wide that says that anybody who comes in over a certain size unit, maybe 10, 12, 15, I don't know what it is, but they have to do an affordable housing component. Have we done that, or does it only apply to those certain sections? So, for instance, let me give you an example. Peter Mako, what is that, 100 acres? 200 acres? What's Mako's, 100, right? 102 acres, actually. That's where the two came in, 102 acres. If he were to come in, and I think he might even have an application. Mayor, you're on the planning board. Did he file an application?
Pat? Pat here? No. You have to
No.
wait for Pat to come back.
Well-
Or Jay. Jay?
He did file an application.
He filed an application, Mayor. So if he were to come in and request his approvals, he wouldn't have to do any affordable housing under the ordinance. Is that correct or not correct?
At this point, he has filed an application, depending upon, we just passed a form of the developer's fee ordinance.
The fee ordinance, yes.
Now we can see if we have to apply that to him and see if it works for him.
Okay, but he would then pay the fee, but he would not have to do an affordable component there?
It's
Well,
either or, the way I read the.
It's either or.
We may not
Correct?
want, right, because we may not want him to do one there. And we have litigation that says we're doing Plan, let's call it A.
And it's either or up to whom?
Well, right now, there's a preliminary agreement between the court and the borough that we will do a number of, I believe it's 5, inclusionary sites.
Okay.
So then, if those sites, for some reason, do not work out, or we don't get the number that we're looking for in terms of the number of affordable units, then we have to look at other sites.
So if we had that ordinance in place when Gondak Drive came in for approval, the planning board would not have been able to say to them, you don't have to do an affordable component like some other folks in town have to do. They would be required to do the affordable component, right?
Well, I think that's theoretical because Gondak Drive was a number of years ago. If we said something about 2007, I don't know if anybody in the state knew anything about what was going to happen with the future of COA in 2007.
I didn't say anything about 2007.
Well, I did because you're talking about Gondak Drive.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know when that was approved. Okay. So I think that ought to be considered so that it doesn't just apply there. And one other point, at the last meeting, we talked about applying for open space funds for that prime area that is adjacent to Kennedy Park. I think this, if we follow the argument about the 37 units and we tell Kaplan to apply them somewhere, a logical place for him to apply them would be that prime property so that he didn't have to put market rate apartments adjacent to Kennedy Park where we have a lot of ducks living. And we would then be in a position, if we had that and we had the Green Acres money before, that coupled with maybe some county open space funds and the borough's open space funds, you'd be able to buy that property from him so that could be preserved and be added to the park. So at the last meeting, the mayor very skillfully asked the question, why don't we just ask him if he wants to sell it? I hope, Mayor, not hoping that that would be forgotten and never be raised again, but I'm raising it again. I think we should go get the appraisals. I think we should see if we could get the money, and we ought to have that in our back pocket so that when we go bargain with him for fewer units there, that we have the ability to purchase that. Obviously, he's got to make some money. He's paying taxes on that property, and if we have the funds to buy it from him, we should, especially if we apply those 37 units, and that too could be negotiated. You know, I don't know how many are supposed to go over there in that prime parcel. I don't think it's 237. Maybe it's 120. Maybe that's something that could be negotiated, coupled with the fact that we would buy it with open space funds that were meant for things just like this. So I would ask you to please not forget that if we're seeking appraisals, and that ought to be an easy one to get because we got an appraisal not too long ago, and in fact we got a promise of Green Acres money. We didn't pursue it, but so they're familiar with it. There's a record on this. There's a case. It has a case number. So I would respectfully suggest that you do that. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions or comments? Being no other, you got one, Val?
Val Tar, 27 Yorkshire Place. I normally don't get up here to speak, but I've been here for several meetings lately, and I just find it so appalling on the way you conduct the meeting, insulting our council people and members that come up and talk and people. It just appalls me, and I find it very hard. And I know that this is on TV, and you see thousands of people that are watching this. And I wish you'd take it and get control of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Being no other questions or comments, entertain a motion to close the public
Before we
portion.
do that, Mayor, you had made a comment before about people volunteering to serve on boards. I have before me, I believe we all have it in our packet, an application from Mr. Tar to actually serve in one of the vacant positions that we have on the Rent Leveling Committee. Our chairman has, just in the last meeting, had to resign from that position, and I thanked him for his service. So I would like to move forward that Mr. Tar be considered and appointed to that position on the Rent Leveling Board. That is a motion.
Councilwoman, there's actually there's actually two openings, one from
I know.
2012.
Yes, I know. And I did receive notification from the Rent Leveling Board that unless they get appointments to these positions, they don't have enough individuals to even conduct a meeting.
What
I
position-
second that appointment.
Just let me clarify that for the record. Now, you're appointing to the vacancy or to fill George Cohilo's position?
George Cleo's position is
It's
the
an
chairman.
unexpired term expiring this year.
It's an and let me ask
Procedurally wise, I think she can only.
She can only do
I
Chet.
can-
2012 one.
Yeah, I think so.
That she can only do what?
It's the mayor's appointment.
The Rent Leveling Board?
No,
No.
the George
No,
Colello
George
position
Coleo's
isn't 30
is-
days yet, so it's still the mayor's
Oh, I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
Mayor.
It would have to be
Absolutely
the
right.
expired.
No, they need to conduct, they need to have a quorum, so
Yeah.
I have no objection to
Thank you for
appointing
that.
Val.
For the vacancy.
Val to George's unexpired term.
Thank you, Mr. Tar, for stepping up.
So which is
and
it
doing
going to
that.
be then? Is
It would,
You
We'll
might as
start
well-
out with his unexpired term, and then we'll go from there.
Well, we have one that's a full term
Come up
instead
here
of
in
somebody.
January.
yeah,
I know, but we have, if we can appoint him now to the other
Into the
position,
full
it's a
term.
couple of years, isn't it?
I have no problem appointing him to the unexpired term, and then January, appoint him again. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that Valtar be appointed to the full 3-year term dating back to 2012.
Well,
I
since
second
it's
that.
mine for 30 days, Dan.
Not the
No,
2012
not
one,
for,
Mayor.
Not the
not for Chet
2012.
Swartz.
Okay,
That's
okay.
been vacant
Then
you
since
got it.
2012,
I second it.
Kennedy.
All right.
Yeah, well, I need to know what to do with the motion that was first made by Councilwoman Kilpatrick
And seconded.
and seconded.
well,
That's the motion, though, she said on the unexpired.
To Chet.
And I had another person make a motion, so.
She said
What?
to Chet.
If the
No, I
motion was
said to
made
check.
and seconded, then it has
No,
to be withdrawn, and the second has to be withdrawn.
But
So you have to.
she
you
But I
have
made
to
the
didn't-
motion
withdraw
to
your
put
motion.
Chet in there,
There was a,
Chet's position.
there's a motion, if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a motion made to appoint Mr. Ms. Tar or Ms. Tar?
Mr. Tar.
To the unexpired, or the term that, or the vacancy since 2012.
Yes.
Right, for the
was
vacancy from
seconded.
2012. That's what,
So there needs to be a vote on that. And if that fails, then the mayor had proffered an opportunity to appoint Mr. Tar.
Nothing is easy, is it?
So my suggestion is let them vote on the original motion.
That was my question. Thank you.
Roll
that's,
call.
so we're voting on the original motion.
All right, it's a motion to appoint Mr. Tar to the term, the vacancy, the vacant term.
Vacancy.
The vacancy.
Vacant term or vacancy.
Wait a minute. Vicky started off with the unexpired term?
I didn't use
No.
the word
The one
unexpired.
that's been open since
No,
2012.
yeah, the one that's been open
Yeah,
since
Well,
2012.
first of all, it wasn't clarified as to
Right.
which she was doing.
Exactly, thank you.
Until I had asked the question.
Exactly.
And I'm still kind of up in the air as to where we were going with it, because you, Councilwoman, wasn't clear.
She,
Right.
I think, is now clarified it, once she's got information, that it is for the vacancy since 2012.
The only
Since
vacancy she can appoint.
That's the only one I have authority to appoint.
And then it was seconded by Mrs.
Novak.
Novak.
Yes.
Are we ready? No, not at all.
Councilpersons Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Buchanan,
Yes.
Lembo,
Yes.
Melendez,
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Motion to close.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're going to take a 10-minute break.
Oh, yes, please.
I just did.
You could have waited.
What was that? I don't know, I was too busy on the.
The election's over and go back to the
I will.
regular length of
Council
meeting.
makes small sense, it was a small minor change, it's really gonna matter.
It's not a good trend.
Yeah.
Not a good trend, Wayne, not a good trend.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But that's for looking at all of this space or just one?
That was the only piece, yeah. Yeah, just, that was the only piece that they wanted to. It's just one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Vacation, it's my first day back.
Probably Dan.
You gave this back to me? It's being returned to me unsigned, is that my instruction? Yeah. That's the,
How the hell would
Fee development.
I'm not going to say.
okay.
This, if you just give that, send that to Bernie.
Is what I said? Okay.
John, you can go home. Go home, man. Go home. Jay has to stay.
Can I go home? No.
Here you go, ladies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Batteries are still good.
Okay. Go ahead.
I hope we're not paying him. I hope he's not being paid.
you, sir.
Mike, where'd you put the extra agendas? Or the?
Right back on the.
They're in the back. And one other thing is that the planning board meeting was supposed to be televised according to the schedule for Channel 15 at 6 o'clock tonight.
I can answer better than he can.
And it's not on YouTube. So was there a problem with filming that?
I have no idea. I'd have to ask the IT director.
So your granddaughter the other day.
You know,
When was their last meeting? Last week?
yeah, it was Wednesday, the 4th. And I spent an hour today on Channel 15 trying to write down all the meeting times for televising, and then I put the TV on and kept checking it at 6 o'clock, and I kept checking it until I had to leave to come here.
Okay, I will check with him.
All right, and I assume, is that the same time every night, or?
That's the schedule.
All right, so I invested the hour trying to write it all down for a good
Yep,
purpose
those.
then.
Yep, that's usually the time.
Okay.
They usually.
I appreciate that. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Jessica's fault.
I thought I was
She
gonna.
hasn't been here for the past couple meetings, so we cannot blame it on her. You'll have to blame it on
My goal is
you.
just to get out before for last week.
Right, Jessica? We blame it on you.
You ask for a yes or no answer, he can't give it. I can answer better than he can. He doesn't know there's a Gillette building
was all silent on my back is killing me.
What's going on? What, are we all stupid here? Nobody knows what's going on.
We waiting on Mary and Vicky. Pat is there, Mary's there, here comes Vicky. Yes.
She's in the ladies' room. I didn't even see Kennedy come back in. I was waiting for him. So I'm going out. Oh, did he? Well, not too good, Sina. What? What? It was so funny. I see that commercial all the time that says, a year ago, my mother started to fight for her words, and I think that's me all the time now. What was that word?
Still missing one.
You just have such a great vocab. I think it's really, though, being a grandma. And I start. Just got me. Can't do that. CJ, the baby, for some reason, he feels he likes to hold me. And the first thing I do.
I'm gonna leave so the officer can get back on the road.
You want to give him an escort home? I read these two things
sure there was a line.
No, we have
No?
two
Oh.
in the ladies' room.
Ah, ah.
Oh, there was two people. That's right, because we're special.
Isn't that special?
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Would everyone please stand for a salute to our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jessica, statement of publication.
Take notice that this agenda session meeting of the mayor and council being held on this 10th day of October 2017 has been advertised and posted in accordance with Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975.
Roll call.
Councilpersons Buchanan.
Here.
Grillo. Kilpatrick.
Here.
Lembo.
Here.
Melendez.
Here.
Novak.
Okay, a call out if you have questions or comments on ordinance 378, 379, 380. Committee reports, Administration and Finance, Councilwoman Novak.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the minutes and departmental reports is listed under A, number 1.
Second?
He'll go if he gets.
Okay, I'd like approval for the applications for bingo or raffle licenses as listed under the, on the agenda under B1.
Next item.
Notice of retirement of William Cruz as omnibus driver in the Office on Aging effective September 30th. Receive and file.
October 30th.
Okay, October 30th.
Okay, next item.
Notice received from PSCNG of petition filing with the BPU of public hearings. Receive and file.
Speaking to the
You want me to do them all again?
No.
Okay. D, notice received from PSCNG of petition filed with the BPU for the public hearings. Receive and file.
Next item.
Letter received from Amboy Bank requesting a letter of credit be canceled for the estate of Stephen Kajerski, Nina Estates. Refer to the engineer.
Next item.
Okay, report and recommendation from the Open Space Committee on property acquisition and the use of open space funds. We actually did that at the last meeting.
Anything else, Mary?
Couple of things on roads. Pulaski Avenue, will we be going out for bid on this, or did we go out?
We have to get DOT approval because it's DOT funded, so as soon as we get their approval, then we can advertise for bids.
How long do you think that'll take?
Hopefully within the next few weeks.
And our streets over in Morgan that we already went out to bid for, I know we haven't started it because the PSC&G is still over there working?
Actually, they're trying to work together, so we do have a contractor, he's working on Norton Street. Norton and Vineyard were the two streets.
Right.
He's
Yeah, I know.
actually working in the area.
Oh, okay, because I know that they work 2 days and then they disappear for 3 days, and
Right,
then they
yeah.
work 2 days?
The contractor started to work around what they're doing.
Okay, good, thank you very much.
Anything
Other than
else,
that,
Mary?
progress, Mayor.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning, Councilman Lembo.
Thank you, Mayor. Move the following minutes and reports be received and filed. Planning Board minutes of September 20th and the Middlesex County Planning Board minutes of September 12th.
Next item.
Notice to adjacent property owners, Borough of South River amending their zoning ordinance, Chapter 350, and Township of Old Bridge holding a public hearing on October 10th to consider master plan reexamination report.
Next item.
Also receive and file letter of resignation received from Patrick Walsh of the Board of Adjustment dated September 27th.
Pat, can I ask you a question? Is that from the entire board, or is that his position as chairperson?
It's from the board.
That's from the board.
Thank you.
Next item.
Notice of retirement received from Francis Toth as Code Enforcement Officer in the Construction Office effective January 1st of 2018.
Next item.
Notice of freshwater wetlands application to New Jersey NJDEP filed by J.P. Morgan Chase for property located at 7 North Ernston Road.
Would you do public safety also? Ben?
Yes, I just want one other thing, Mayor. Just wanted to commend the Sayreville High School Marching Band for this past weekend. The band, the staff, parents, and all the volunteers that hosted the Night of 1,000 Stars. They really did a great job, very well attended, and it was a very nice night. Everyone had a good time. Under public safety, no minutes and reports. Notice of retirement received from William Gottstein as Police Sergeant in the Police Department effective November 2017.
Councilwoman Kilpatrick, Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no minutes or departmental reports for today. And under my committee reports, I would just like to state and actually ask a question on behalf of the Shade Tree Commission. One of the things that the Shade Tree Commission has asked for, and I think that's a good idea, I just need a little direction as to who to tell them to contact. When they go out and do their shade tree inspections to check the trees, oftentimes they have to either go very close to people's properties, sometimes even go like a foot or two on. And these are individuals that don't have any vests or any other type of identification, and our residents do get concerned when they see these people kind of strolling around their house and staring at things on their yard and so forth. What they requested was that they get some type of badge or an ID, so that way they have some type of official card that they can show individuals so that they don't alert residents, an ID.
We have it down at the police station. They're
Yeah,
able to
that's what I
produce it.
thought. So I would just like if somebody, if you wouldn't mind, maybe Dan.
I'll let Sergeant Gavin know that, just give me the names of the Shade Tree Commission people.
Okay, great, that would be perfect. And that's all, Mayor. Thank you very much.
Recreation, Councilman Melendez.
Item A, no minutes of departmental reports.
Okay.
I just have a couple things. This past Saturday was the running of the annual Hit the Bricks 5K run at the Nature Preserve. I want to thank the Recreation Department, Jerry, us, the sponsors, borough departments, especially Phil Quigley, Parks Department, EMS, the Rec Advisory Board, the Girl Scouts, and the volunteers, especially George Kavenko and family who helped make the race a big success. They raised over $4,500 for the children. I also want to thank the Sayreville Junior Bomber Pee Wee football team, my team. They ran the race with me. Head coach Eric Scott and Dennis Moody, and my son Armando for running the race in 23 minutes. He actually forced me to chase him. I got there about 32 minutes, but it was a good day. We raised a lot of money. This year's Halloween parade is on October 27th at 6:30 at the Borough Field. So it's usually a big event. Hopefully we have great weather. And there's registrations going on for this fall and winter's school programs at the SUES. And that's it for recreation.
Thank
Progress.
you. I'm sorry, Water and Sewer, Environmental, Council President.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I want to just discuss is going a little
And I
further.
can't
I'm sorry. Just want to discuss a little further what Mr. Robinson had requested. I know we're in the process of looking at properties for purchase through the Open Space Fund, and I'm going to ask that we authorize Mike to look into other funding, such as the county open space or Green Acres funding for these properties as well. See what the process is and see if we could start looking at securing the funding for these properties.
Great idea, Dan, but we have Elise Barone she's the grant writer.
Again, we're looking for funding from these from the
Right.
funding from the
Okay.
county and the.
She's on payroll,
Sure.
That was my point. Okay, next item, Dan.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Business Administrators Report, Dan Franco.
Thank you, Mayor. Authorization for the municipal clerk to advertise for the annual request for proposals for professional services to be appointed on or after January 1st, 2018.
Next item.
Authorization to appoint one laborer in the Department of Public Works effective November 1st, 2017. The recommendations in your packet.
Next item.
Authorization to appoint Tom Pruskowski on a per diem as-needed basis effective December 1st, 2017.
Next item.
Authorization to extend contract 2015-4 traffic light repairs and maintenance to Gen Electric of Springfield, New Jersey for an additional 2-year term.
Next item.
Authorization to purchase playground equipment for the sports complex through a state contracted vendor, Game Time Company, Spring Lake, New Jersey, for a total not to exceed $99,720.84 after a grant in the amount of $36,985.
Next item.
Authorization to appoint one omnibus driver in the Office of the Aging Department. Recommendation in your packet.
Next item.
Notice of a slight increase in residents for services rendered by HomeServe USA. The product pricing is in your packet.
Next item.
Appointing Mike Gervasio as water treatment operator licensed effective September 1st, 2017.
Is there anything else?
That's it, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, I just have a question, please. Dan, there was a meeting held regarding the radios. There were some issues that were addressed with the radios. Could you update us all on that?
Do you want to?
Ricky?
You could start off, finish.
There was a meeting this past week, or the past week, for all of the stakeholders that we have with the radios. We brought together all of the people that were involved with it, from Harris Tactical to VCOM to police to fire to EMS to, although EMS was not there. The mayor was there, Councilman Melendez was there, I was there. We talked about some of the issues that were going on. We talked about issues that were cleared up. We talked about that we felt, that all of the stakeholders felt, I would say, Mayor, pretty confident that we have a lot of the bugs that have been worked out. There's still a couple of bugs, but we feel confident. We felt definitely by the end of this month, everything would be, I would say, probably 98 to 99% done.
Good.
Yeah, I sent you a report. Did you get it, an email, Pat?
Yeah, I see there was one issue with the battery life that needed to be upgraded. Is there going to be a cost associated with that?
No cost to us, and
Okay.
they were ordered, and they should be again. I think they were expected in, I believe the date was October 19th or 20th, I believe.
Okay, as long as there's no cost to us. I mean,
cost.
how do we end up with 8-hour batteries for a 10-and-a-quarter-hour shift?
No cost to us.
Okay, that's fine then.
CFO, Wayne Kronowski.
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Borough Engineer, Jay Cornell.
Thank you, Mayor. The three items listed, were provided for your information. You took action during the first part of the meeting, so nothing else this evening. Thank you.
Okay, Borough Attorney's report, Michael Dupont.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, public portion, any questions or comments? Being no questions or comments, entertain a motion.
Move the public portion be closed.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for all staying tonight.
Good night, Wayne. Good night, John Boy. Good night.
But I would do that. I would not do that now.
No.
And you got.
Do me a favor, you know Coolhouse Lane is, goes down to Lakeview?
Yeah.
So you got 30 yards.
We do that.
What happened?
It's not ours.
Whose is it?
It's really, it's Lakeview that comes up. It's, I mean, we put hot patch on. That's all we can do. We can't.
Who's responsible for paying? Lakeview or us? Is that a? Hey, Jay? Sorry.
Jay knows, it sounds like a joint thing that comes up. You can see the change of the pavement right
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
Exactly the
Yeah, but
change.
who does the last, Jay, who does that last bit of Coolhouse Lane to Washington Road? Like 20 yards, 30
Where the
yards?
shopping center is, where the shopping center stops and it goes down into the Lakeview, into the, is that? It's all borough?
Okay.
Yeah.
That first 30 yards, it's all chopped up. Yeah, on Coolhouse Lane.